one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, August 19th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 21 degrees. It does feel like 29. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. It appears the federal Liberals and Conservatives are in a near dead heat as the election day is just over 1 month away. Here's City News reporter Mitch Burke.
A new independent analysis has the Liberals barely out in front with 33.4% support versus 32.1% for the Conservatives. The NDP have just over 20% voter support and the Green Party sits at just under 6%. Earlier this week, a Leger poll had the Grits leading by 5 points. Stronger than expected Conservative backing from Ontario and a general sense of disapproval for this snap election to begin with may be behind an apparent slip in Liberal support. Now, it'll be a busy day on the campaign trail with a focus on Western Canada. Liberal leader Justin Trudeau will speak in Victoria. The NDP's Jagmeet Singh will be in Edmonton. Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole has an announcement on tap in Nepean near Ottawa. I'm Mitch Burke.
City News time 9:01. Now your forecast with meteorologist or make that weather specialist Denise Andriachi.
We'll keep the umbrella handy this morning and into the afternoon through Smiths Falls as we do have some showers working their way through. It's going to be a warm and muggy day today. Highs for Smiths Falls near 26. For Ottawa, highs near 28, feeling like 37. We're very hot and humid for Friday in the nation's capital. Highs near 32 degrees with a humidex of 40. Your daytime high today, 28.
And right now in both Smiths Falls and in Ottawa, 21 degrees. It does feel like 29 in that humidity. One person in hospital after a serious collision involving a motorcycle and a vehicle in Perth. Lanark OPP responding to the crash on Highway 43 just about 12:30 this morning. The driver of the bike suffered serious injuries. An investigation into the cause is going on now. Highway 43 closed between Rathwell and Drummond Concession 1. Two MPPs from the governing PCs in Ontario have until 5 this afternoon to either prove they're vaccinated against COVID-19 or supply a medical report on reasons why they can't be. The two from Toronto and southwestern Ontario have been ordered to get their shots. The Premier says with close contact MPPs have with many people, it's necessary for them all to be vaccinated. The city says the investigation into an axle bearing problem with one of the LRT cars is going to continue for some time. Now, 9 trains are undergoing additional analysis before they are returned to service. So far, 37 of 39 cars in the LRT fleet have been inspected. The 2 that haven't are the train that had the axle bearing problem in the first place back on August 8th, and another undergoing maintenance, which will be inspected for the axle problem once this maintenance is complete. A detailed update on the investigation will be given at the next scheduled Transit Commission meeting. That's coming up on September 20th. City News time, 9:03. Canadians observing the Taliban's swift takeover in Afghanistan say they are skeptical of the group's claim women's rights will be respected. Shahzad Mujab with the University of Toronto, a professor there, isn't convinced by the Taliban's latest promise of reform for women, arguing there is no room for women's rights under Sharia law.
No matter of so-called amnesty that Taliban is providing or promising, this is not going to happen. Sharia law by itself is authoritarian, dictatorial, exclusionary, and it's patriarchal and against the rights and well-being of women.
Now, the Taliban said this week they would respect women's rights and forgive those who resisted them. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
When the headlines say X,
he's got the Y.
it's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's another soupy day out there. In 2 months, it would not be unusual to see snowflakes in Ottawa. 2 months. We had snow flurries Last year, on the 26th day of October, not to be the bearer of bad news. Nothing like that today, though. Foggy, sticky, sweaty, downright tropical. Good morning. Welcome to the Rob Snow Show on City News, Day 5 of the federal election campaign. And the Conservative leader is back in town. Aaron O'Toole is stumping right now in Nepean, a wonderful place to be in. He's talking about housing affordability.
The life they dream of. To live on a street with good neighbors, as my friends told me they do. If your family can afford to ignore the housing crisis, you have three parties to choose from. But if you want your government to secure a future where you and your family can afford a home that meets your needs, you have only one choice: Canada's Conservatives. Together, we will secure housing for Canadians. Ensemble, on va agir pour rendre.
So that's happening in Nepean right now. That is happening in Nepean right now. Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole. Now, I subscribe to the daily election newsletter from Politico. It's very good. I would recommend that you subscribe to it too. This morning, it suggests that Pierre Poilievre, Conservative MP Pierre Poilievre, is in a real dogfight for his own riding, Carleton. And that's why O'Toole might be in neighboring Nepean today. Politico says that the demographics in Carleton are changing. And it might be, as a result, leaning more for the Liberals this time around. I don't know. For my money, that would be a huge upset. Imagine if the Liberals managed to knock off Pierre Poilievre. He's won 6 elections in a row. And there, of course, has been all kinds of speculation that he is already positioning himself to be the next leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. Oh, the intrigue. Oh, the intrigue. And we'll get into some of the local issues and the local races this morning here on the Rob Snow Show with the help of Postmedia columnist and author Randall Denley. He's coming up in just a few minutes' time. Randall has a column in The Citizen this week headlined, "What's at Stake for Ottawa in Canada's Federal Election?" And from there, we'll take a more province-wide look at the election campaign. Battleground Ontario, or vote-rich Ontario, seat-rich Ontario. Ontario politics this week is coming up after the 9:30 news. With our good friends Lindsay, Maskell, and Andrew Brander. Lindsay is of the Liberal persuasion. Andrew is more on the right side of things. One of the things we're going to get into are these reports that Doug Ford and Justin Trudeau have called a truce. They've called a truce. What is the motivation behind that? To cease all hostilities. Could there potentially be a break in the ceasefire? I would remind you, Doug Ford, last time there was a federal election, which wasn't that long ago, right? It was less than 2 years ago. Doug Ford was public enemy number 1 for Justin Trudeau. Everywhere Trudeau went, he didn't want to talk about Andrew Scheer. All he wanted to talk about was that big meanie, Doug Ford. Remember?
Conservative politicians love to say they're for the people. Exhibit A, Doug Ford. People like Doug Ford who say they're for the people. The Conservative Premier in Ontario, Doug Ford, cuts to public education, cuts to health care, cuts to the services. He cut Ontario's pharmacare program, cuts to public health, cuts to childcare. That's what Conservative politicians, Doug Ford, do.
That was 2 years ago. These days, Trudeau's not talking about Doug Ford at all because of this truce. You know what? Trudeau's not even talking about Aaron O'Toole all that much. The big, bad boogeyman this time around for Mr. Trudeau is Stephen Harper. Stephen Harper lives rent-free in Justin Trudeau's head. But also, this is the second time around that Doug Ford really doesn't have any role to play in the Conservative campaign. Even though you could argue he's maybe the most powerful Conservative politician in the country. And the good money is on Doug Ford winning re-election next year. Last time around, Andrew Scheer didn't even want to be seen with Doug Ford. He thought being seen with Doug Ford was a liability. It appears this time out, Doug Ford has taken himself out of the game. He's benched himself. Where is Doug Ford anyway these days? Where is he? Where is he? You're going to get into all of that after the 9:30 news. Ontario politics this week. Also coming up on the program today, the economy, interest rates, inflation, the cost of living. We're going to come at this from a couple of angles this morning. First, we're going to talk to an economist, one of the best in the country, Benjamin Tell from CIBC World Markets. The CPI came out yesterday, the inflation rate, the cost of living number from StatsCan, and it was a hot number, 3.7% year over year. Cost of living up 3.7%. Anybody get a 3.7% raise in the last year? Because if you didn't, you're falling behind. Now, it's very much a gas price story, right? Gas prices are up something like 30% in a year. But it's not just a gas price story. Everything to do with shelter costs, they were up. Food prices, they were up. And yet it seems to me nobody in authority is all that worried about it. Even though it's the hottest inflation reading in, well, at least a decade. And Doug Porter, the top economist at the Bank of Montreal, I heard him on the radio this morning, and he said inflation is actually running the hottest it's been in 20 years. I mean, I've always been told, look, a little bit of inflation is okay. You want a little bit of inflation. But too much is universally bad because there's a hidden tax. And it's why it's been the compulsion, I mean, the obsession of the Bank of Canada since the late 70s and early 80s, slaying the inflation dragon. Gosh, it's amazing to me how this has taken hold of the first week of the campaign. Boomers, baby boomers know all about inflation. Bad memories for the most part. Baby boomers remember the days of double-digit inflation, double-digit interest rates. Imagine this, my millennial friend. You go into your local bank branch to apply for a mortgage, and your banker tells you, have I got a deal for you? David Smith, have I got a deal for you? Your interest rate is only going to be 19%. I mean, those were the days. But now we're told by economists, by central bankers, nothing to worry about. You don't need to worry about inflation. As long as you don't use shelter, you don't eat food, and you don't drive a car, there's no inflation at all. Yeah. Tell that to the Canadians who are polled by Abacus Data, because they told Abacus Data it's their number one issue, the cost of living. Number one issue in this election campaign. And yet Mr. Trudeau is asked about this yesterday. Well, he's asked about monetary policy and the mandate for the Bank of Canada, which is kind of technocratic. But, I mean, at the heart of it, it's about the cost of living. It's about the inflation rate. And he really came across as he either didn't know the issue or he does it even worse, he doesn't care about the issue. That's how it came across in a clip that went viral for all the wrong reasons. Mr. Trudeau asked by a reporter about inflation, about the Bank of Canada's monetary policy, and this is the viral clip. This is what went viral on Twitter yesterday.
There's some talk of allowing the Bank of Canada to make some tweaks to the mandate to give it a little bit more flexibility to tolerate higher inflation, so it could, help stimulate the economy a little bit more in this very difficult time. Do you have a position on the mandate? Would you support a slightly higher tolerance for inflation?
I don't know. When I think about the biggest, most important economic policy this government, if re-elected, would move forward, you'll forgive me if I don't think about monetary policy.
You'll forgive me if I don't think about monetary policy? Okay, then. Okay. Now, because I am tough but fair, and in the interest of fairness, I will play you the longer clip. Okay? Because the clip it's cut off at the end. It's edited for effect. It's edited for full partisan, maximum partisan effect. So, Dave, we don't need to hear the question again. Let's listen to how Justin Trudeau finished the sentence, how he finished that sentence. Roll tape there. Okay?
I don't know. When I think about the biggest, most important economic policy this government, if re-elected, would move forward, you'll forgive me if I don't think about monetary policy. You'll understand that I think about families. When we first got elected in 2015, the very first thing we did was raise taxes on the wealthiest 1% so we could lower them for the middle class.
Back to similarly, 2019 talking points. He cares about families, okay? But he doesn't think about monetary policy. Okay, even though monetary policy has a big effect on families. From the value of $1 to the price of everything, to the interest that we pay on everything from mortgages to car loans. Look, he's running for re-election. He's been there 6 years. And he is leading a $2 trillion modern, industrialized, diversified G7 economy. I'm sorry, with all due respect to my liberal friends, that is a lightweight answer. Lightweight. So this morning, we're going to get into the economics of inflation. We're also going to get into the politics of inflation. Every morning we do the talkback hour of phone calls, hour of opinions, hottest hour of talk radio in town. And on Thursday, we've been doing 3 election questions. And I have 3 more questions for everyone this morning. This morning, I want to ask you about inflation, because it's back in the news. I want to ask you about immigration, which I'm surprised has not been in the news. And I want to ask you about privatization of healthcare. 3 election questions during the talkback hour. We're here until noon. 3 hours of news and views on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Ottawa Markets was created by the City of Ottawa to help rejuvenate the outdoor markets program in Byward and Wellington West, where we have the Parkdale Market. And so we set to work on bringing in the right team with the right experience and reaching out to local vendors and local farmers, because we knew when we did a survey of our customers that was the one thing that was really important to them, both at Byward and in Parkdale, is to start bringing back that local product. And that's what you can see behind us here at the York Street Farmers Market. We put in place a Farmers First policy, which means that we will deal with farmers from the region first. And we're going to give them priority in terms of placement. They're going to have reduced fees in coming to the market. We've also made it free for any farm that's been in operation for under 2 years. The market also put in place a BIPOC initiative, which is a Black, Indigenous, and Peoples of Color initiative, which provides grants and support opportunities for folks from those communities to come on out to the market to reduce systemic barriers that have existed. As a farmer's market, we can have a variety of vendors here, from an artisan to a microprocessor who's taking local ingredients and putting them into a product in a kitchen and selling that, to breweries and distilleries this year, which were changes that the province put in place, which allowed us to bring in a few of those vendors as well, which I think is a nice surprise for people sometimes at 9 in the morning after a pandemic. But it's been going really well, and some of the breweries have been pretty appreciative, because for them, whether it just be doing delivery or curbside pickup, it gives them an opportunity to come back out and talk with their customer and talk about what makes their product so special. Throughout the market, the health and safety protocols that you're going to see, masks are still required. That is obviously the case, and you'll see a number of signs noting that around the area. We've got a number of hand sanitizer units, I call them droids, throughout the area that you can sort of just grab a pump or a squeeze wherever you go. But what we've also had to do is reduce the number of vendor spaces we have in the market by 50%. This ensures that we can guarantee that our vendors are going to have that distance, that we can, have a little bit better flow around the market. But what we also did was, as I said, we created the York Street Farmers Market, which is just microprocessors and local producers only, and that's on Saturdays. In Parkdale, we launched the night market, which is bringing a lot of the same content, but in the evening, and residents are sort of spilling out into the park. So we're looking at what we're doing as trying to support, create, and enhance public space for the residents of the city. It's been great, you know, the community, which is what this market is here for, and then as tourism comes back, obviously we'll welcome all visitors. But the response has been really great. The community's come on out, they're speaking with their wallets and their dollars, which obviously at the end of the day, we want a great experience, but it needs to be a valuable economic opportunity for the vendors who are coming out.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News 101.1 FM.
and 1310 AM.
Let's talk about the Ottawa angles early into this election campaign. We're 5 days into the federal election campaign. Randall Denley joins me now, Post-Media author and columnist. Good morning. Great to hear from you again, Randall Denley. Welcome.
Morning, Rob.
Yeah, great to hear from you. What are the big issues in Ottawa? Why is this election important, particularly to the people who live and work in Ottawa?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that, you know, we're obviously a government town, and it's our leading industry, and so much flows from government here, a huge number of jobs. A lot of our land is controlled by the NCC/federal government. I mean, there's nowhere in the country where the federal government has a bigger direct impact than Ottawa. So the thing I'm highlighting in my column this week is that people really need to think about the actual individuals that we're electing. Catherine McKenna was our lead minister for Ottawa, kind of mixed reviews, I guess, in that job, but she wasn't terrible at it. She's not running. Who's going to do that? Mm-hmm. And I look at the people who are now elected, likely to be re-elected. There's nobody there with a track record of understanding the city, sticking up for the city, making sure that our point of view is listened to. So I think that's a big need.
Yeah. If I could just jump in there, I was you're so right on. I was wondering the same thing just this week. If we think about past elections and so-called, what I would call, say, super ministers, they're regional super ministers, and there's always kind of been one from the National Capital Region, whether it's a John Manley or a John Baird or a Catherine McKenna. There's somebody who has to kind of be there to talk about Ottawa, the Ottawa context as the National Capital Region. I'm wondering who's out there that is going to be the heir to that position. And you're saying, yeah, that's a good question. Who is that person, right?
Well, I think the obvious choice there is Yasser Naqvi if he gets elected.
Okay.
I think that he will.
You think he will? Okay.
I do. I don't. Well, that riding Ottawa Centre is one of the interesting ones because it's NDP provincially, which certainly indicates a willingness to go in that direction.
And all the councillors are hardcore lefties too, right? So
it's the NDP's best shot in Ottawa, and I wouldn't be disturbed to see them win it. But the downside, if they do, is that assuming there's a Liberal government, Naqvi is the only person in that group who really is going to offer any kind of local leadership. I mean, he's with an MPP for a long time. He's a cabinet minister. He's been involved in a lot of things that affect Ottawa directly. So, in his party, he's the best shot. In the Conservative Party, it really comes down to Pierre Poilievre. He's the guy we've got. He's been around a long time, elected 6 times. I wouldn't say that he's ever been overly local focused, but he did raise an interesting issue, I thought, when I interviewed him a few days ago.
Okay.
A big thing for us, huge unanswered question is, to what extent are federal public servants coming back to work downtown?
Yep.
And when's that going to happen?
Yep.
I mean, that really affects our downtown and our transit system hugely. And, Poilievre's idea is that, well, a lot of people want to work from home. So maybe the federal government should have a policy of allowing work from home wherever possible. That would reduce their footprint downtown. And in some ways it's negative for Ottawa, though I think it would probably meet people's needs, and there's an upside to it in terms of less commuting, less polluting. I think it's actually an idea that needs to be discussed. But there's been really no guidance on this whatsoever from the federal government / Liberal Party. You know, they got a few people going out to test what it's like to work in the office again. Pathfinders, they're calling them, Rob.
Pathfinders, yes. Pathfinders.
Yeah, you probably can't even remember where your office is. So we're sending some of our sharpest people ahead as scouts. They're going to find the office. And then they're going to report back. As
like the guides of Algonquin Park, you know.
Yeah, it's like they got compasses, GPS. They're going to find the office. These are our best people.
Yeah.
So that's the state of thinking there. But there are a number of Liberal MPs here who've been elected more than once. Honestly, you never hear the name mentioned from one year's end to the next.
No.
They don't come from a real background of civic service, city council. We have key players in the community that just become MPs. What do they really do? There's nothing that's visible in our community. Like, they're a really weak group of people. So I think that voters need to be smart now, not just think about party or leader, but if you see somebody you think might make a contribution, pay some attention to them. And in my riding, Carleton.
Yeah, what do you think could end up happening?
That's an interesting one, because there's two people who are demographically very similar, Jenna Suds and Jennifer McAndrew, both professional women, good education, good background, obviously different political views. I think either one of them are the kind of person who would, seem likely to accomplish something. I mean, Suds has an advantage in having been a councillor, although she's only served part of one term, so probably not quite as much as you might hope there. But this is a riding that's, it's held by Conservatives provincially. It's been held the last two times by Liberals federally, so it could go either way. And the Conservative candidate in that riding in the last election was not overwhelming. So they have a seemingly better candidate this time. Like every race, it depends on the big picture, but that's one I think where voters need to pay attention to weigh these two candidates carefully and say which one of these is really going to represent our community and be able to raise our problems with the government. Who would be more effective? Because that's the main area where I would see a chance for someone new. It's an open seat.
Yeah.
I don't see the incumbent people being overturned unless the party's portions at the national level really change.
Okay. Do you think Poilievre is going to hang on in Carleton? Yeah.
I do.
You do?
He's done it 6 times now. He's not like a universally loved guy, but he's a well-known guy. He's a smart guy. He works hard, and he's a good campaigner. I mean, he got a little bit of flack for running TV ads. People like, what? There's a candidate running ads on television. This is outrageous. Yeah, political candidates have only been using television for the last 60 years, so, I know it's new and dangerous. It's not terribly expensive for that kind of a campaign. It gives you good visibility, so why wouldn't you use that kind of media to raise your profile? And, good for him for having done it, because it's a tough campaign. Going door to door now is challenging.
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting times. Thank you, Randall Denley. Always great to hear from you.
Thanks a lot, Rob.
Yeah, Post-media columnist and author Randall Denley, Ontario politics this week after the news on City News.
one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, August 19th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now, feeling like 30 in Ottawa and Smiths Falls, 21 degrees. And here's what's making news this hour. Federal Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole says over 3 years, a federal government under his direction would build 1 million homes. O'Toole also says his party would review the 37,000 buildings that are currently owned by the federal government across the country with a goal of releasing 15% of them. Latest poll shows Liberals and Conservatives within a couple of points of each other now. The Liberals in the slight lead at 33, 32 points for the Tories. NDP in third place at 20 with the Greens at 6. Now, a poll just done earlier this week from Leger, for example, had the Liberals ahead of the Conservatives by 4 percentage points. A poll earlier this week, there was a section of Highway 43 in Perth that had to be closed due to a serious collision involving a motorcycle. Actually, this collision just happened after midnight last night. A rider suffered serious injury in the collision on the 43 between Drummond Concession 1 and Rathwell Road. That area is now closed for a police investigation. City News Time at 9:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
It's time for Ontario politics this week with my good friends Lindsay Maskell, Liberal strategist, former advisor to Premier McGuinty. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Welcome back. And Andrew Brander, senior consultant with Crestview Strategy, former advisor to the Ford government. And guess what? Andrew is not in Toronto today. Andrew is in Ottawa. Welcome back to Ottawa.
Where all the exciting things
This is the place to be, buddy. Hey, it's good. It's good.
I missed it. I spent 10 years here, and first time back though since the pandemic. So
good. So you'll get to see some old friends and stuff.
Exactly.
So, good for you, Andrew. Good for you. Well done. Okay, we're gonna launch right into it. Okay, let's take that trip back in time again. Okay. 2019, Prime Minister Trudeau running for re-election, and public enemy number one is that big, mean guy, Doug Ford. Roll tape, David.
Conservative politicians love to say they're for the people. Exhibit A, Doug Ford. People like Doug Ford who say they're for the people. The Conservative Premier in Ontario, Doug Ford, cuts to public education, cuts to health care, cuts to the services. He cut Ontario's pharmacare program, cuts to public health, cuts to child care. That's what Conservative politicians, Doug Ford, do.
Man, he sounds awful. There, nevertheless, was a report this week that Justin Trudeau and Doug Ford have declared a truce for the election. A truce. Andrew Brander, what's going on? Why would this happen? What do you think is going on, Andrew Brander?
Well, I think I'm surprised about the formalization of the truce, because the ceasefire has been in place for several weeks now. Of course, even a few months ago, the premier's party was putting out ads going very aggressively against the Prime Minister on borders. We talked in recent weeks about the fact that Ford would take a back seat. His announcements on vaccines this week provincially for both provincially regulated sectors, and the ultimatum that he seemed to issue to his MPPs are very much in line with Trudeau's positioning on that issue. It seems these days they have more in common than not. I think the calculation from Trudeau's perspective is that the Premier is in a much more popular position today, believe it or not, than he was the last time we were going to the polls federally.
Last time the budget had come out, and there were cuts, and it was pre-pandemic, and all of this kind of thing, right? There were, he'd lost his finance minister, and he was getting heck all the time, and
Yeah, exactly. And I would just say, though, to the rumors that have been going around, if the Premier is looking at his long game here, if Ford has his eyes on a federal run at some point, he might want to take a few lessons from the paths of people like Peter MacKay. Tories tend to have a long memory on these things. When MacKay, sort of bailed on Harper's campaign in 2015 and sat on the sidelines for Andrew Scheer's campaign, a lot of Tories looked at that when he ran for leader and said, this isn't something.
Well, what have you ever done for us, right? Well, yeah, what have you ever done for us?
Right,
yeah,
it's a team sport.
Yeah, team sport. Yeah. It's a great point that you make. I want to hear from Lindsay. Give us the Liberal perspective on this, Lindsay.
Well, it is. First of all, it's really much more fun doing a campaign against your actual opponent, and the difference in where we're at this time, right? So, 2 years since the last election, more than a year and a half into a pandemic. It's time for people to get to have their say on how they think this is going. And it isn't about the boogeyman of, who's going to have their election, at the end of this year, right? So that we're not in the same position we were last time. We have had the full dose of Doug Ford, and I will commend that. I'm happy that he's obviously taking this action on his caucus members right now that are unvaccinated. But that isn't the issue in front of Canadians right now. So we are going to try to, obviously have a forward offer campaign. And it's more important to have Canadians have their choice between what their current government and the forward offer of a plan for the next 4 years and the alternative. And Doug Ford isn't really in that mix. They get their say on him. Ontarians get their say on him in about 300 days.
Right. Okay. Let's say Doug. You never know. Maybe the Ontario race tightens and the Liberals find themselves having to, go on the attack. And all of a sudden there's hostilities have resumed. Let's work from that assumption. And Doug Ford has to speak to some criticisms or what have you. Would Doug Ford's participation in the campaign discussion, would it be helpful to the Conservative cause? What do you think, Andrew? Would he be a help or a hindrance, do you think?
Yeah.
He's a pretty potent force.
I do think, exactly, and I do think that the Premier has been critical in the past on things that the Prime Minister is extremely vulnerable to. His constant reminder to the people of Ontario that the lockdown measures that we saw, that the closures of businesses, that the closure of schools was in large part in response to not procuring the vaccines that we needed. And I think that that's a strong message that certainly can take away from a Prime Minister who has called an election during a time that a lot of people are concerned about what comes next, and a lot of people don't even need the crystal ball to see what's going to happen in a few months from now, which is we're going to be largely in the same spot, and it's going to be for the same reasons, which is instead of focusing on the measures that need to be put in place, the procurement of boosters and other efforts that could minimize these types of impacts, we're going to be back in this, and people are going to be pointing to the fact that the federal Liberals chose to run a campaign instead of focusing on the issues that matter of the day.
Okay. What do you think? Maybe Justin Trudeau would love nothing more than to use Doug Ford as a whipping boy again, since it worked. It worked 2 years ago. What do you think, Lindsay?
Well, I would disagree with Andrew because, of course, Canadians have access to have everybody fully vaccinated. It polls as the number one success item of the federal Liberals, people feeling safe in terms of being able to have access to vaccines. Canadians should be congratulated on the rate that they have gone out and got vaccinated. And, just announcement after announcement about, and especially important, the agreement with Moderna for domestic production. But what they do remember is that the province is the one that imposes severe lockdowns and had to go into lockdown again and didn't do things soon enough that resulted in a third wave lockdown that just was really bad judgment. And people will remember things like the potential of police checks and things that happened in the spring. That if he comes out, he should. If the groundhog comes out, as we say, there is the risk that there's a lot to shoot at there. I prefer campaigns where they don't. It would be nice to have him, have it be a bit quiet on the provincial front. And as I said, he's talking about the right things right now about getting more people vaccinated and trying to make sure we are not back in lockdowns. But if I were him, I would not want to pop my head out based on this past spring.
Right.
And
okay.
Their popularity is not there. So it is, the better chance is more that he maybe has some local ministers, getting the strength of the provincial organization behind them on the ground locally, but not getting into the media war, because that probably doesn't turn.
All right, Lindsay, let's stick with you. What's your sense of the race in Ontario right now? Much has been made. The Liberals only need to pick up 15 seats and hang on to the rest of the ones they have, and they have a majority government. And they may be able to find 15 seats just in Ontario. The polls seem to have this consensus that the Liberals are up by about 10 points in Ontario. What's your sense of battleground Ontario right now?
Yeah, you can definitely feel that, and it helps that it's summer and people are feeling optimistic. And we measure ourselves against the world in relation to pandemic response. So people are feeling pretty optimistic. I do think the big battleground pickup area, I like to call it that stretch from the 401 west of Toronto all the way down to Windsor. So those ridings that are off of the 401,
okay,
so those urban rural splits. So lots of nice small towns, those areas where the Conservatives have held a lot of seats.
Right.
But it's also always interesting in downtown Toronto where, you have a lot of vote splitting on the left and campaigns that are going to be hard fought in downtown Toronto. But you definitely feel that. You definitely feel that bump here.
Well, look, you're in Toronto, Lindsay. So give us a sense of the NDP Liberal battle in Toronto right now. What's, did the NDP have any chance of picking up some Toronto seats that they've lost in the past? Or
the NDP are always interesting to campaign against because having done joint work with them on a municipal campaign, they spend that first couple days in the campaign trying to get themselves written into the race, and the media rightfully want to give them a good chance to do that. But the truth is you end up with a lot of fine organization, sort of that same group of people, but, not a game for the long run. And then they really do send people where they need to pick up. So, you often will see people ending up, back in Windsor. I think we're going to end up with a lot of Toronto NDPers in Windsor fighting for Brian Massey's seat.
Okay. How would you describe the federal election so far? Battleground Ontario with the Liberals, the polls would seem to see up about 10 points on the Conservatives in Ontario. Andrew?
I think they're narrowing. I think we always tend to see a little bit of second thought at the start of the campaign, and a lot can change. Certainly in the coming days, but I think the Tories are in a great position to be able to capitalize on that.
Okay.
As I was going through the Tory platform, you do actually see a number of policies that you kind of come across and you're like, oh, are people talking about this? And then you realize they're extremely micro-targeted policies. That will impact specific ridings that the Tories are going after, and let's remember too, the Tories out east this past week came back from a more than 20-point gain for them to win a very
we're going to talk about that. Don't worry, we're going to talk about that.
Government.
Yeah. We're going to talk about that after the news. Hey, right now, let's just stop for a second here. We'll take our commercial break, but I do... Yves-François Blanchette is in Gatineau today, so we kind of have a national capital focus here because Mr. O'Toole was just campaigning in Nepean, and Mr. Blanchette, the bloc leader, won't spend too much time here. He's in Gatineau, and he's talking about health care, and we know all about the problems with the West Quebec hospitals. Okay.
Potential future crises like the one we're going through.
Talking about healthcare transfers.
Perhaps the follow-on of this crisis or a new one. It also allows us to focus on healthcare required by the elderly, for example, seniors.
Pour faire en sorte
it would allow us also
l'urgence de l'hôpital de
to ensure that the emergency room here in the Gatineau Hospital not only be open from 6 to 8 after having been closed for 2 months, in fact. No one should have to wait 8 hours to be seen for a broken leg. In a city like Gatineau, for example, it's ridiculous to say that the emergency room is not an essential service.
I would say he's on to something there, the situation with healthcare in West Quebec. So healthcare, that's what he's campaigning on right now on the other side of the river. Housing affordability for O'Toole today while he was in Nepean. Prime Minister's on the West Coast today, I believe. 9:47. Be right back. Ontario Politics This Week. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Opening a business especially in a pandemic, in that kind of situation, is very challenging. First, people don't know me, people don't know my product. To build a new clientele, to build a trust for them, to show them that I care about it. I do love my food. That was the biggest challenge. And of course, in all lockdown, we had to face it regards my employee, girls, ladies, what they work for me. I didn't want to tell them, sorry, I'm closed, I'm not having a job for you. No, they have families, they have kids to feed. So this is very important because we are family orientated. And we decided to open. We, of course, essential business. So been very tough, very, very tough, as we didn't see people on the road. Market was completely quiet, but we knew it that we have to wait, and we knew it that we're gonna be fine. In this town, we built online shop, Vedel Online, and we did Uber Eats, which one is picking up and is very, very popular. We have a really good feedback. So this is the song for my heart. And and we try to expand. I'm thinking about opening another location. So I want to make Vedel famous. I want to make the Vedel place to be for all the families with kids. Try the traditional food, what their grandparents cooked in the countries when they're from, or even Canadian people. They're more than welcome to come and try our famous pierogis. I try to be passionate about my food, organic food made with love, with all homemade, organic. So you can find food from all over the Europe: Polish, German, Ukrainian, Romanian, French, Armenian. So all kind of different types of food. Homemade lunches. We focus on the homemade lunches, grandma style. I keep always saying, like in my Genia Babcia house, how she cooked. I wanted this love and this food over here because I believe that would bring all people around me. And all the organic cold cuts, lovely selection of sausages, cheeses, European cheeses, great selections of mustards, French cookies. All what you need from Europe you can find here at the Vedel Touch of Europe. If you think good way, that's it. You have to. I had the option to cry in the corner and say, oh, pandemic is coming. No, you need to stand up and fight for it and have your eyes open, think outside of the box and do it.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Okay, we're back. It's Ontario politics this week. Now, look, this isn't about Ontario politics, but all the political junkies are reacting to it, trying to digest the results of the Nova Scotia election, where the Liberals had a big lead, and Tim Houston and the Progressive Conservatives orchestrated a huge comeback. Not only did they win a majority government. So Lindsay Maskell and Andrew Brander are here for our panel discussion this week. And Lindsay, what lessons can be learned for all political campaigns?
Well, definitely about not taking voters for granted would be point number one.
Okay.
Number two would be, if you're going to call a snap election, you need to make sure your ground game is ready. You saw a lot of campaigns not ready to be going. If you're the one pulling the trigger, you need to be ready. And also, there were some modernization issues of the way that this campaign was run on both sides. From the fact of post-pandemic needing a stronger digital campaign, all of those issues that really did result in what we saw the other night. And it wasn't shocking for most, as we saw a particularly bizarre approach to the campaign just going completely dark the last 4 days, hoping that
weird.
It was a very strange approach, especially because that's your last call to action to voters. It was very strangely run, and I think we'll probably hear some things coming about as we say, when the wheels fell off the bus, in terms of what happened with the team there. But that it was pretty shocking to see that, and did sort of remind me of that, if it was Kathleen Wynne's moment, it would be the moment in the sandbox, right? So it was just that when you decide to just go dark for 4 or 5 days, you have thrown in the towel. It was a very bizarre move. So definitely you need to think about having a strategy that even if you are fighting for 20 seats, 15 seats, that you're doing it in a winning way. So it was a very bizarre thing to watch. But I do think that was obviously very local to the province, and but definitely some lesson learned for everybody out on the campaign trail now.
Okay. Andrew?
Yeah, I completely agree with Lindsay on all of that.
Okay.
The other thing I take away, I worked on the last 2 campaigns out there, not this one. But what I would say, lesson for the Tories is that times have changed, and healthcare has been the number one issue. There are thousands of Nova Scotians without a family doctor. I've seen community meetings with hundreds of people in very small communities with people coming out for this issue. The Tories tapped into that this time. They talked about increased investments in healthcare, which is not something typically you would have seen the former Progressive Conservatives talk a huge amount about. And I think also the federal Tories have looked at that as well, and that's why I think you've seen Aaron in his platform this week talk about a 6% increase, and sort of put aside the issues of a complete focus on budget balance and more a focus on the things that really matter to these smaller communities where you don't have the options that larger cities tend to have in terms of flexibility and scalability for healthcare.
Okay, we have about 2 minutes left here. So I want to ask you this. Again, it's Ontario politics this week, and we're cross-pollinated with the federal election campaign. So what is an Ontario riding that you are interested in watching on election night that you consider to be a bellwether riding? In other words, if the Conservatives win this one, they're going to win the election. Or the Liberals are winning this one, they're going to win the election. I said to our panelists yesterday, Ottawa West Nepean. Okay, good record since its creation of going with the winner. Marlene Catterall, John Baird, Anita Vandenbeld. Okay, it's gone with the winner. What's your riding? Andrew Brander, Ontario riding, bellwether riding.
Bellwether riding, I think you're right, Rob, for majority government. Let's talk about a more realistic situation where we're looking at another minority this way. And for the Tories to win a minority, I think I'm going to choose the neighboring riding of Nepean, which, of course, as you mentioned already, was where Aaron O'Toole
that's where he was today.
His announcement this morning. Matt Treenstra is the candidate there. He's a seasoned political operative, which means he knows how to run an effective local campaign. I think that the Tories are going to look to these types of ridings, these suburban ridings, and speak to the issues of affordability and livability, quite frankly. And if they can tap into that and win those ridings, they'll be looking good on election night.
Nepean, a wonderful place to be in. Okay. Lindsay, what is your bellwether riding in Ontario?
Well, that one was an interesting call. I used to work with Matt, so I'll be watching it closely. But I love him dearly. Don't think it's going to come together, but we shall.
Okay. All right.
The provincial Liberals would generally, I bet, if you asked any handful of us, we all always watch Peterborough. So it is that city with some urban, rural elements of it. That is the one with it, both provincial and federal, that people that have done the hardcore work in Ontario tend to kind of look at as our bellwether riding. That would be mine.
Who is that? A Liberal riding now?
It is.
Is that Monsef?
Yes. So,
and it used to be Del Mastro before that.
Yes,
then, right?
correct.
Okay.
And, she's had some challenges as well, and it does have a real.
Well, she hasn't been dragged out of a courthouse in handcuffs, so she's doing a little better than Dean Del Mastro, I guess.
But it does the rules surround on it. It's an interesting
leg irons. They put the guy in leg irons, for crying out loud. All right, that's it for
of Canadian politics.
Man, don't overspend on your campaigns, okay? They'll put you in leg irons. That's it for this week. Andrew, enjoy the Capitol, my friend.
Thank you.
Have a good time. Lindsay, we'll talk next week.
Yes, I look forward to getting back to Ottawa.
Okay,
Thank
our
you,
Toronto correspondent. Lindsay Maskell and Andrew Brander, that's Ontario Politics this week, the Talkback Hour, and 3 election questions for you after the news on City News.
This is City News.
CIWW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, August 19th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now, feeling like 30. It's 22 degrees in Ottawa, 21 in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Day 5 of the federal election campaign. Party leaders focusing on the National Capital Region and also the West today. Announcements on housing and health care. City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney with more.
Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole is the first leader up today announcing his housing strategy, promising to build 1 million homes over 3 years, selling off 15% of federal government real estate to turn into housing, and to ban foreign investors from buying homes in Canada unless they plan to live here. But the issue of abortion is taking the spotlight, since in the back of the Conservative election platform, it states the party will defend conscience rights for doctors. Aaron O'Toole says he will defend the right of a woman to choose, but he also will stand up for the rights of doctors to refuse to perform medical procedures.
I think we can also defend conscience rights for our incredible men and women on the front lines in our healthcare system. That is something we're going to do, particularly as we're
The Liberals have put out a release saying this amounts to a cut in access to health care for women, the LGBTQ2 community, and all Canadians for procedures like abortion, access to contraceptions, and assisted dying. Liberal leader Justin Trudeau making an announcement in Victoria, BC later today. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is talking about health care in Edmonton. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
Now, Bloc leader Francois Blanchette is in Gatineau this morning. He was asked about health care in the Outaouais in particular, and he says health transfers have to be changed. Blanchette says the aging population in Western Quebec deserves more health care cash because, statistically, the older the population, the more health care is needed. But he says this all starts with the federal contribution for health care. He says it should be at 35% of the total instead of the current 22%. City News Time 10:03, and now your forecast with weather specialist Denise Andriacci.
We'll keep the umbrella handy this morning and into the afternoon through Smiths Falls, as we do have some showers working their way through. It's going to be a warm and muggy day today. Highs for Smiths Falls near 26. For Ottawa, highs near 28, feeling like 37. We're very hot and humid for Friday in the nation's capital. Highs near 32 degrees with a humidex of 40. Your daytime high today, 28.
And right now, feeling like 30, 22 degrees in Ottawa, it's 21 in Smiths Falls. Canadian women say they are skeptical of the Taliban claims women's rights will be respected under Islamic law in Afghanistan. A spokesperson for a not-for-profit Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan says their organization is very worried about the possibility of gross human rights violations. The group says it has received reports of Taliban members going to homes in Kabul and collecting information on residents, while in smaller provinces there have been killings reported. Canada has 2 military transports ready to assist former interpreters and helpers of the Canadian effort in that country leave. Now, while the airport has been declared safe, around the airport, it's anything but. A section of Highway 43 closed in Perth after a serious collision between a motorcycle and a vehicle in the overnight hours. Lanark OPP responded to the crash between Drummond Concession 1 and Rathwell Road around 12:30 this morning. The driver of the bike suffered serious injuries in the crash, was taken to hospital. An investigation into the cause is ongoing, so Highway 43 currently closed between Drummond Concession 1 and Rathwell. And at the Women's Open at Carnoustie, Scotland, Smiths Falls' Brooke Henderson is 2 under par after 6 holes. She's currently tied for 5th. 2 are in the clubhouse already after shooting a 5 under par for their opening round, and the lead, that does include world number 1, Nelly Korda. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues
with 3 election questions. Yeah, every Thursday during the Talkback Hour, we've been doing something called 3 election questions, and it's, hey, it's Thursday. It's So it's time for 3 election questions. These are basically questions about issues that are likely going to come up during this election campaign. And in fact, some of today's questions have already come up during today's election campaign. This election campaign, wow, we've covered a lot of territory when we've done 3 election questions. And I have to say, I've really been enjoying the conversation. And I hope you will participate again today at 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. So without further delay, here are today's 3 election questions. What can be done to combat the rising cost of living? Higher inflation. What can be done about that, in your opinion? 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. Question number 1. Question number 2. Okay. By next year, Canada's immigration target is set to be close to 400,000 people. What do you think of that number? Okay. What do you think of that? 400,000 immigrants a year to Canada, okay? And question number 3, do you support or oppose more private delivery of health care? Do you support or oppose more private delivery of health care? Those are today's 3 election questions. Give them some thought, and then give me a call at 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310, because it's your hour. But if you don't call, you know what? I could talk for hours. On inflation, okay? Because this is the hot political issue of the day, the rising cost of living. And I want to get back into this today because it's very much in the news. It's in social media. It's all over social media. It's gone viral. And for the Liberal team, it's gone viral for the wrong reasons, because it's a flub from Mr. Trudeau. Okay? Because there was a clip on Twitter yesterday. Justin Trudeau is asked a very technical question by a news reporter about the Bank of Canada and monetary policy and whether the Bank of Canada should have a more accommodative monetary policy. Okay? When it comes to the inflation target. And Mr. Trudeau, at least in the viral clip, we will play the more fulsome clip, but in the viral clip, he flubbed it. I mean, there's no other way to put it. He basically said, I'm not interested in monetary policy. It's not something he thinks about. He's not losing sleep over it. Those are my words, okay? Those aren't his words. Let's listen to his words. This is the viral clip.
There's some talk of allowing the Bank of Canada to make some tweaks to the mandate to give it a little bit more flexibility to tolerate higher inflation, so it could, help stimulate the economy a little bit more in this very difficult time. Do you have a position on the mandate? Would you support a slightly higher tolerance for inflation?
I don't know. When I think about the biggest, most important economic policy this government, if re-elected, would move forward, you'll forgive me if I don't think about monetary policy.
You'll forgive me if I don't think about monetary policy. Yeah. Let's play, David, let's play the end. Let's complete Justin Trudeau's sentence for him, okay? In the interest of fairness, fair and balanced. Rob Snow, tough but fair, okay? Here's the longer clip, okay?
I don't know. When I think about the biggest, most important economic policy this government, if re-elected, would move forward, you'll forgive me if I don't think about monetary policy. You'll understand that I think about families. When we first got elected in 2015, the very first thing we did was raise taxes on the wealthiest 1% so we could lower them for the middle class. And similarly, a re-elected Liberal government will continue to invest in supports for families, for students, for seniors, investing in housing, because we know it is not right that so many people right here in the Lower Mainland and indeed across.
But he doesn't think about monetary policy, if you'll forgive him. Okay? So now we all have an understanding of what he was saying. But will people actually do what David and I did, okay, in the interest of fairness and balance, and go looking for the longer clip? Okay. Or will it be the viral clip that remains top of mind for those who see it? Okay. Aaron O'Toole, do you have the Aaron O'Toole I believe the Conservative campaign has just released this kind of response video on Twitter. Aaron O'Toole talking about Justin Trudeau not losing sleep over monetary policy. Let's talk.
I'm wrapping up a great day in Quebec, and I just heard what Justin Trudeau said.
I don't know. When I think about the biggest, most important economic policy this government, if re-elected, would move forward, you'll forgive me if I don't think about monetary policy. You'll understand that I think about families.
Justin Trudeau says that he doesn't think about monetary policy because it doesn't matter to families. Let that sink in. He doesn't think that inflation hurts families. He doesn't think that higher prices for food, for gas, for housing matters to families.
Okay, all right, that's enough. That's enough. You see where he's coming from. So he's all over it. He's all over it. It's an election campaign. You're supposed to be all over it. Okay. And we had polling data out this week from Abacus data that the rising cost of living is the top issue for Canadians right now. We talked about the cost of living yesterday. A lot of response on the cost of living and housing affordability. And the Liberal leader, Mr. Trudeau, the man who triggered this snap election, which we now know will cost roughly $610 million. He doesn't come across as being, at least in the viral clip, okay, as being on top of the issue at all. I don't think about monetary policy. I mean, if I am the Conservatives, I am going soundbite crazy on this. I'm just playing, I don't think about monetary policy. Let's play that clip, David. I don't think about monetary policy. I'm using that in every ad from now on.
You'll forgive me if I don't think about monetary policy.
And then if I'm like one of the Conservative surrogates like Canada Proud, I'm just going, I don't think. Hey, maybe it's a good thing that he doesn't think about monetary policy. Let's leave the monetary policy thinking to the experts in monetary policy. Okay, that's enough. Like the big brains at the Bank of Canada, right? But look, Mr. Trudeau's viral comments, you can see them being interpreted as out of touch, right? Because the inflation report was released yesterday, and inflation is getting worse. Okay, it's not cooling off. It's starting to hurt. And Canadians are noticing. And it would be good if the Prime Minister noticed as well. Okay, let's get 3 election questions going here. Kevin. Good morning, Kevin. In Canada, you're on City News. Kevin.
How are you doing, Rob?
I'm good, Kevin. Thank you for calling. So let's do 3 election questions here.
Okay, so...
What can you do about inflation?
Well, nothing, because don't forget, think about it. Way before he got elected, he told us all the deficit will take care of itself. You remember that?
Oh, the budget will balance itself. Yes.
Well, yeah, the budget will take. Well, he basically, I believe the words were, "It'll take care of itself."
The budget will balance itself, and the budget will balance itself. Yeah.
That's right. Boy, did that come right? I don't think so.
Well, no. He's never balanced the budget, but yeah.
The weird thing is that he started out saying he was going to run a $20 billion deficit, or so I think that was the
$10 billion a year for no more than 3 years, and then the budget will balance itself. Yes.
And thank God COVID came along, so it just opened up the vault, and he's been spending like a drunken sailor. And you know what? I look at it like it's a guy who's got a credit card, and he's in a bar, and he says, "Drinks on the house all night long for me."
Yeah, I've been that guy. Okay. Yeah.
It's us that's paying the credit card bill.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so I understand. Not much. We are where we are. We're kind of stuck with it. Okay, that's your opinion. By next year, this is question number 2, the immigration target will be close to 400,000. Okay? I want to know, what do you think of that number?
I just hope, because it seems to have been working out. I don't see riots in the streets. You go down to the States, and if you go far enough south, you might think that you're back in the in the 1700s. I think Canada's quite nicely balanced. I think we should try and spread it out a bit, though, a little bit more, because we don't want to have, you
don't want things concentrated in the 3 biggest cities or something like that, exactly. Right? Yeah, well, certainly Atlantic Canada needs immigration desperately.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, every place in Canada.
Right.
But
it's about 1%. The target is about 1% of the Canadian population a year through immigration.
Like I say, I don't see us all fighting and screaming and yelling. I mean, intercity stuff, there's gangs and there's whatever, but. It seems to be working out okay.
All right. Let me ask you a final question, Kevin. Do you support or oppose more private delivery of health care?
I support it.
You support it? Okay.
Absolutely. I think what they should do is the government should pay for it all, but it should all be subbed out to individual contractors.
So you can go with your OHIP card. Let's say David and I are surgeons, and we have Rob and Dave's knee surgery. Okay, we're open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we can do 100 knee surgeries a day, top-notch knee surgeries a day. You show up, and we're going to bill the government. You would be okay with that?
Well, consider this. In the nuclear industry in Canada, and I know my brother actually used to work for the Koch brothers in Toronto, that is so regulated. And it's not that hard to do if it's done by a private company. And they're excuse the saying, their nuts are on the line if they screw up. So if we properly control it and let the private industry or whatever private sector run the hospitals, because the hospitals are running deficits that are ridiculous.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Kevin. Okay, yep. 3 election questions. We're just getting started. I'd love to hear from you. Phil, Matthew, 2 lines available there at 750-1310. Rob Snow Show Talkback Hour on City News.
This affected us big time because when, you know how we are seasoned. We have clothes for the spring, clothes for the winter. That time, lots of clothes didn't arrive on time from Europe or from here because some factory shut down. So, and this put us in an odd position. We received not all the merchandise, part of the merchandise, and people. And for us, we have to be careful, especially with the virus going on. It did affect the business, of course, like everybody else. We're not immune, and since the government helped, this did a little bit good for us too, but still affected all the sectors, especially clothing. You can see big corporation affected bad because nobody was thought it's gonna be like this. Earthquake might happen, we joke about it before, things might happen, but this was like a third war, but with a virus. So how to survive, that's the question, and we're doing our best to work with the mall, especially rent in a mall is very high. The government, they have certain, let's say, condition, like how many people will be in the mall or in the stores, etc. Yeah, it's a big factor, but of course, if my store has a back doors or just will be better, it will be much better. At least we can have curbside much easy because we have to shut down completely, and this left a mark on us, on everybody too. People always ask me, go online. Certain things you can't go online. Let's say t-shirt, certain product people don't know how to fit. But when it comes to clothing, it's different completely. Let's say I have a customer comes, you can give him 44, but certain suit he might take 42, certain suit he might take 46. So, and how could, suit is not gonna fit the same. And I see people come back and they show me what they got online, and not the same fabric. Mostly young people, but if you really want to shop, you have to go to the store because everything will be around you. You want to be sure the color look good, the fit will look good, especially when you spend, doesn't matter how much money, whether 300 or 2,000, You have to try, you have to see what's going on. Please don't be shy, contact us. It will be a pleasure for me to take a suit or coat or anything. Like sometimes people have a funeral, they have things, they have a wedding, they don't want to come to the mall. If I get all the information, I will go and meet them at their home or their business offices. I'm gonna start doing that, and this will help the business and help the people. Like they're afraid to come to the mall for time being, or they're too busy at work. They cannot go anywhere at certain times, so I'm glad to do that.
Time to talk back.
On the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
3 election questions. So inflation's a big issue. So question number 1, what can you do about inflation? What do you do about the rising cost of living? Question number 2, by next year, Canada's immigration target is to be about 400,000. What do you think about that number? Okay. And by that I mean, is it too high? Does it sound about right? Should it be higher? Okay. And number 3, do you support or oppose more private delivery of health care? Phil in Ottawa. Good morning, Phil. Thank you for calling. You're on City News.
Good morning. I believe inflation can be controlled by the reduction in tax on basic goods.
Okay.
Like it used to be with like milk and stuff like that. And that would help out lower income families.
Okay.
I believe immigration, the number should be increased, especially in humanitarian cases, like when they had the earthquake in Haiti. That we should have brought in more people for sure.
Okay, so it'll be 400,000 for 2022. That's the target, right? You're okay with that number? You don't have a problem with that number?
No, I think we can go even higher with the demographic.
Even higher? Okay.
Yeah, people are getting older, and these people are going to support the old people when we get at a certain age.
Yeah, good point, sir. Very interesting. Okay. Do you support or oppose more private delivery of health care?
Yeah, I believe that private health care should be, and again, there's exceptions to the rule, but I believe that it should be the responsibility of the individual. I believe there's exceptions when, like, low income and stuff like that, or seniors should get health care, but there's people in the federal government that pay into health care, and they should be getting, and we should really examine health care and the quality of health care we get. For the amount of trillions of dollars we're paying into
Absolutely, sir. Yeah. Good points, Phil. Thank you. Yeah. Like I said, 400,000, big number. It's about 1% of the population. That's the target for 2022. Okay. I mean, there's been almost no immigration because of the pandemic. I'd like to know what you think about that number. I want to be clear. I'm pro-immigration. Okay. I think Canada, it's a necessity for the country, a robust immigration policy. The economy depends on it. I'm against illegal immigration. And I think that's where most Canadians are, including the vast majority of recent immigrants to Canada. So I want to know what you think about that number. Is 400,000. The official number is 390,000. I'm just calling it 400. Okay. It's a nice round number. Okay. It hasn't become a big election issue yet. It's usually great fodder for the Liberals. They view immigration as a great way to wedge Conservatives and accuse them of being racist, right? But I don't think it's come up so far on the hustings. None of the leaders have really talked about immigration. I can't recall any questions about immigration yet. Liberals are saying 400,000. I looked at the Conservative platform this morning, very detailed immigration platform. Doesn't provide a number, though. And the NDP had a curious quote in its platform on immigration. Quoting, okay. This would fit right in a Conservative immigration platform. A new Democrat government will make sure that our immigration policies and levels meet Canada's labor force needs. A new Democrat government will make sure that our immigration policies and levels meet Canada's labor force needs, end quote. That's right in their their platform, which is called Ready for Better. And private delivery of healthcare, I want to ask you about that. Back to the phones. Matthew, Almont. Matthew, you're on City News. Good morning.
Hey, Rob.
Hey, thank you for calling. What do you do about inflation? Everybody says they're worried about inflation, but what do you do about it?
Boot Trudeau out of office.
Get Trudeau out of office. Okay.
Give him the boot.
Give him the boot. Give him the boot. Okay.
Well, don't print money.
And then do what? Stop printing money. Okay.
Don't print money when you don't have the means to back it up or devaluing the dollar. So.
All right. Okay.
That's all.
Too spendthrift. We're spending too much. You're saying just spending too much money.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. 400,000 people is the immigration target for next year. What do you think of that number?
As far as I know, that's a fine number. It's,
Okay.
With a large country, we definitely have the space.
Lots of space. Yep. Aging population, right, Matthew? We have an aging population.
Yeah, make sure that we have homes to put them in.
Yeah.
And
jobs.
And
right.
jobs, and make sure we're not bringing in like welfare recipients. Just people just gonna come in and live off.
Yeah. Well, I think this is what the NDP platform is saying here when it says a new Democrat government will make sure immigration policies and levels meet labor force needs.
Yeah.
Right. No. Yeah. Sure. Okay. And do you support or oppose more private delivery of health care?
Support private.
You support more private delivery of health care?
I know my brother had a friend who said that he needed a hip replacement, and he was on the waiting list for so long that basically his the other hip went out.
Yeah.
So now he needed a double. So I think that if we in private, a lot of people would move over to that, willing to pay to get better health care. Let's face it, you can wait years for something that you desperately...
Well, we had the head of the Ontario Medical Association. Is it Ontario Medical Association, Dave? Or Canadian Medical Association? 22 months now for knee surgery. 22 months, almost 2 years.
That's way too long.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people would want to move over to private health care, which I assume would free up a lot of the public health care, and that 22 months might be cut in half maybe.
Okay. Thank you, Matthew. Great call, sir. Let's take one more. Take one more before halftime here. Oh, not that one. We'll get back to that one. We're going to take line one here, David. We're going to take Ian in Brockville. Good morning, Ian.
Good morning, Rob.
Yes, sir. Nice to hear from you. Okay, so 3.7% was the latest reading on inflation. Lots of people are saying cost of living is driving me mad. But what do you do about it?
Well, my thunder got stolen a little bit, but that's very okay. Aaron O'Toole has his pros and his cons. I agree with the bulk of what everybody thinks about that man, whether it be 10-minute-long videos about coin clipping. But at the end of the day, it's very informative. And to be quite frank, if we stop printing money, avenues, I'm kind of ignorant to that aspect of things, or just get a government in here that doesn't like to just continuously hand out money, I think we might be able to get the ball rolling on lowering inflation just a little bit.
All right, okay. 400,000 is the target for immigration for next year. What do you think of that number?
Again, it's a lot of these are going to be government oriented. I'm all for inflation, Rob.
For immigration.
Sorry, all for immigration. Yeah. There we go. I do not like inflation.
No, neither do I. Yeah, but you're pro immigration, right? As long as it's done the right way. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, the people we need the workers, especially in construction here. You ask around. I mean, we are so shy in every industry right now.
Yeah, there are a lot of jobs going begging right now. A lot of employers can't find people. Find enough people. Yeah.
I've got a good colleague of mine, and he works for a construction company. They actually have to rent out their laborers right now because they can't even find anybody to do labor work around here.
Wow. Okay. And one final thing: are you opposed or do you support more private delivery of health care?
Well, that one I'm going to remain on the fence on. Again, under the right government, I'm completely for the government running our healthcare system.
Okay.
Now,
because they're doing such a good job?
No, not this government. But I kind of feel, Rob, that at the end of the day, I mean, my parents are retired. They have to pay for. I mean, it's obviously not full privatized healthcare they pay for, but they are paying out of pocket now for certain bits of healthcare. At the end of the day, my very ignorant opinion to it is that if a privatized individual, he has more options to do what he wants with his pricing, with how he does his procedure, like the whole realm of it. When it comes to the government being in control, as much as we as a people like to forget that we do control the government, when all Canadians get upset about what's going on with healthcare, we can affect change a lot quicker, in my mind, than dealing with a privatized individual who kind of gets to hold the reins.
Thank you, Ian. We'll talk soon. Thank you for calling today. Yep, Rob Snow Show, halftime on the Talk Back Hour. We're doing 3 election questions. This is City News.
one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, August 19th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now, feeling like 30. It's 22 degrees in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, and here's what's making news this hour. Conservative leader Erin O'Toole says he would sell off 15% of federally owned 37,000 buildings across the country if he forms the next government. He would also ban foreign investors from buying homes in Canada unless they plan to live there. Bloc leader Francois Blanchette was in Gatineau this morning outlining the needs for a better healthcare system in the region. He says it starts with the federal government contributing 35% of healthcare costs to the provinces, up from the current 22. If you're not vaccinated against COVID-19 in Ottawa, you're 20 times more likely to catch the virus than those who've received 2 doses. The Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Vera Etches, says beating the Delta variant of COVID-19 depends on people getting 2 doses of vaccine, as well as continuing measures like mask wearing and limiting your contacts. 531 more cases of COVID-19 in Ontario today, 17 more deaths. 15 of the deaths, though, are from a data cleanup. They all occurred more than 2 months ago. There are 19 more cases of COVID in Ottawa, 1 more in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark. No new cases in Eastern Ontario or Renfrew County. Brooke Henderson continues stellar play on the front nine at Carnoustie at the Women's Open. She is 3 under par now through 8 holes and 2 strokes off the clubhouse lead of -5. That's posted by 2 golfers, including world number 1, Nelly Korda. City News Time at 10:34. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
With 3 election questions. Doing it every Thursday during the election campaign. What can be done to combat the rising cost of living, the inflation rate? Everybody's complaining about the rising cost of living, but what can you do about it? Okay, that's question number 1. Question number 2. By next year, Canada's immigration target is set to hit close to 400,000. It's 390,000. What do you think of that number? Straight up, what do you think of that number? And number 3, do you support or oppose more private delivery of health care? Back to the phones. 3 election questions. Oh, we're going, not there. Again, I keep messing up that thing. I'm sorry, David. That's my fault. We're going to Mark in Ottawa South on line 2. Mark.
I'm not too sure about question number 1. I don't have a firm opinion because I don't feel sufficiently knowledgeable.
Okay,
I do expect the Bank of Canada will eventually have to raise interest rates.
Yeah, okay.
But on number 2, the crucial question is this.
Immigration.
Is it based on the assumption that the economy will have recovered from COVID?
Okay.
The 2019 economy, yes, we could admit 400,000 immigrants. But until we get back to that level, we can't. Because when these people get here, they won't be a fully functioning economy for them to join. They'll have
won't have the right career opportunities, job opportunities.
Exactly.
Okay, all right.
Until the economy recovers. And of course, that would also be the key to helping relieve inflationary pressures, at least as far as it's caused by breakdowns in the chain of supply and that sort of thing. And
also labor shortages. Labor shortages are also inflationary because they drive up wages.
Well, yes.
Wages are major input costs for businesses, so they have to pass those costs along to consumers, which causes consumer price inflation. So,
but when the CERB ends, a lot of Canadians who are choosing, frankly, not to participate in the labor market at this time,
that's right, will
be forced to do otherwise. And at that point, we'll have a more realistic idea of how many foreign workers we need.
So you think it might be a little ambitious right now? 400,000. Okay.
We don't have enough information.
All right, Mark. Do you support or oppose more private delivery of health care?
I've always supported more private delivery of health care. And above all, the great national myth, we have always had 2-tier health care.
Oh, we have many tiers of health care now, I think. Yeah.
But the second tier is the American border. Any Canadian who wants to get a medical procedure as quickly as possible and not wait in the public lineup and has the money to pay always crosses the border and goes south and gets it done. Whether you're Danny Williams requiring a heart procedure, I believe Belinda Stronach requiring a mastectomy, and This has always been happening. Dr. Keon himself has said that we've always had two-tier health care.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Good call as always. Just on this whole monetary policy, I don't think about monetary policy. The viral Trudeau clip, that's the Bank of Canada's job. Okay. It's not really the Prime Minister's job. In fact, we really don't want Prime Ministers involved in setting monetary policy. That's the Bank of Canada's job, to set interest rate policy to ensure price stability and secure the money supply. Don't debase our currency. That's all. It's not Justin Trudeau's job. It's Tiff Macklem's job. He's the governor of the Bank of Canada. But that doesn't mean, politically speaking, if you'll forgive me, you should sound during election campaign like you don't have the foggiest idea what's going on. When people are telling you they're worried about the rising cost of living, you should at least sound like you care. Or you're aware of the situation. And it's not just monetary policy that's inflationary. It's fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is not what the Bank of Canada is doing. It's what the Liberal government has been doing. Is the Liberal government running deficits? Yes. Is it ever going to run surpluses? Not for the next 50 years. Is it throwing money from helicopters? It could if we could buy some helicopters. Is it showing restraint or austerity? Not on your life. That is very much Justin Trudeau's job. Monetary policy, too accommodative, ultra-low interest rates, year after year after year, can be inflationary. So is fiscal policy that's too accommodative. If you're running a nearly $400 billion deficit, in part because you've been sending $2,000 monthly checks to 15-year-olds. Yeah, that's inflationary. And if you're promising to spend another $120 billion on top of all the other money that you borrowed already, that's inflationary. And you know what else is inflationary? Carbon tax is inflationary. Okay. Calm down, Rob. Calm down. Go to your happy place. Okay. All right. We're all good now. David, Ottawa South. Good morning, David.
You go, Rob. You go. Anyway, I've got some thoughts.
What can be done about inflation?
Well, I've broken it down into two parts, which have kind of been covered. One is the actual things that we do, keep interest rates at a certain level that will maybe let them go a little bit higher, not give money to people who aren't being productive, for example, giving it to 15-year-olds and whatever. You know, these kinds of things.
Do you imagine if you were 15 years old, growing up in Newfoundland, David, and the government is giving you $2,000 a month?
When I was 15 years old,
whatever government would have been,
minimum wage was 75 cents an hour.
Yeah. Well, you know, even if we adjusted it for inflation, David, whatever government sent you, I bet you would be voting for that government for the rest of your life.
There's a chance, yeah. Although I hope I'm a bit smarter than that. Maybe I wouldn't be at 15, but I certainly am now.
Okay, so let's talk about immigration then.
Okay, I want to say something else about the inflation.
Okay,
it's not only what people do. That's action can affect inflation. But the other thing is confidence.
Yes, confidence.
Investor confidence.
Yeah.
Confidence in other countries to trade with us. Confidence in borrowers, which affects the interest rate that we pay on money borrowed. All those things. So it's what we do, yes, but it's also the confidence that the fact that we have a sane and logical policy.
Yeah. Also, just the fear of inflation can have a big psychological impact on consumer behavior. You know, that people won't spend money. Oh, sure. Okay, it can be recessionary. So, okay, all right. Okay. So on immigration, the number's 400,000 for next year. What do you think?
I'm good with that. But again, we shouldn't be looking for people to come here and work when we're paying $2,000 a month for people not to work.
And
that's what's driving up the costs of employment as well.
Good point, sir. Okay, do you support or oppose more private delivery of health?
Basically, I support. I've only got one question that really hasn't been answered properly, and that is, let's suppose we have 5,000 doctors in Ontario. I don't know how many it is, but just let's pick a number and call it 5,000.
All right.
And these doctors are all working, regular doctor's hours, doing the best they can, coming in emergencies, so it's extra time in case of a car accident or vital surgery or whatever. I mean, if I have a heart attack and go to the hospital, they said, get him from the waiting room to the OR right away. Somebody's got to be there. But outside of that, we've got 5,000 doctors. And we've got so many needs that need to be done, so many hips and so many of this and so many of that. It doesn't matter in one sense whether the doctors are doing it on the paper service or the government service, because they're only going to do so many jobs anyway. Maybe the fact that they're working in a more of a business manner, they might get more work done per job. And then that will take up the slack of my argument.
Okay. Thank you, David.
Okay, take care.
Bye-bye. Yep. Michaela.
Good morning.
Good morning. You're on City News. It's good to hear from you. Thank you. Okay, so a lot of people are, they're looking at the rising cost of living, but what do you do about it?
I don't know. Increase minimum wage. As it is now, I can't see our country, as you said, being out of debt for the next 50 years.
Well, I mean, the parliamentary budget officer, he's in charge of keeping track of all of this stuff, says we are not going to balance the budget for 50 years.
That's right.
50 years.
Because we keep going into deficit and deficit and deficit
50
and
years.
spending where we shouldn't be spending.
Yeah, okay. So it's a hard one, right? It's a hard one.
It
okay,
is,
all right.
it is.
So the immigration target, let's talk about this, is 400,000 people for next year, immigrants to Canada. Are you okay with that number? What do you think of that number?
I'm definitely not okay. I mean,
not okay
we can't even house the people that need housing.
Okay.
That is one thing. 400,000, I would cut that in half, say maybe 200,000.
Okay.
Then again, you're bringing people in who have not been vaccinated, may or may not be vaccinated.
Well, I'm sure they'd have to be screened and everything else. So.
Well,
yeah. Okay. All right. So too high for you. It's too high.
Oh, definitely.
Okay. All right. Interesting. Do you support or oppose more private delivery of health care?
I oppose.
You're opposed to it. Okay. All right.
Yes. Recently I had a bone chip taken out of my heel.
Oh.
From the time...
That sounds painful. Oh.
It is.
Yeah.
So from the time I got the referral till I got the actual surgery done, it was 18 months.
18 months?
Yeah.
Okay. But what if, I use this hypothetical here. What if David and I are doctors and we open Dr. Dave and Dr. Rob's, bone spur clinic, and you can come to us and give me $200. I'll take care of you tomorrow, Michaela. What if you could do that?
I'm on a fixed income. I can't afford.
Wouldn't matter for you. Wouldn't matter. Okay. All right. Thank you for calling and sharing your opinion today. Call anytime. Bye-bye. Rob Snow Show, Talk Back Hour, 3 election questions. Because it's Thursday. This is City News.
Here at the Thirsty Maiden, we offer a variety of products. So everything from breakfast items, so it's breakfast sandwiches and scones, which have become a staple item here at the cafe. We have an assortment of pastries and cakes and desserts. So we're really big on our dessert bar, which a lot of people come here for. And of course, our delicious coffee beverages. So we do offer not your typical lattes, things like a chocolate banana coconut latte, cinnamon coconut, which is my favorite, and our take on even a pumpkin spice, which we add nutmeg and a dash of cayenne in just to give it a bit of a kick. When you start a business, you don't factor in all the things that could go wrong. You think anything that goes wrong, any failure, it's got to be something on your shoulders. You didn't market right, you're carrying the wrong products, you didn't price your items correctly, all the things, right? But when this pandemic began, things going through my brain were I didn't factor in a pandemic. And we were just starting to grow. We were about to blow up, and I think I spent 2 days crying. And then I shut my business down for, I think, a period of 2 or 3 days. And just being at home during that time, I realized this is not me. Anybody that knows me knows I'm a hard worker, I don't give up, and I'm a go-getter. And I started to think, well, I should probably just start clearing out my freezers and posting and seeing who wants to buy what. And that was sort of how I built my momentum back up. I realized that there's still a large number of people that wanted to support us and were looking for the items that I had to provide. So we started there. Then I reopened literally not even 3 or 4 days after I'd closed my doors, and then started doing curbside pickups and deliveries, started doing the deliveries myself, free deliveries to the local community, going as far as Bell's Corners and Carp as well. And that's why we're still here. This community has really kept us going a year into the pandemic. We've had a changeover of staff a couple times now, and situations change, and when you can't offer hours and hours for your employees, you don't blame them when they have to go elsewhere. So I think that's also been one of the challenges is recruiting, training, and then they leave, and then bringing in more people and recruiting, and anybody in this industry will tell you that that's something we deal with on a regular basis, whether or not COVID's in the mix or not, but more so now because every time there's a lockdown, there's a risk of, will we make it through? And then you lay off more staff, and again, their situations and their circumstances change.
It's time to talk back.
On the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
We're doing 3 election questions. Question number 1. 3.7%, latest reading on inflation. But what do you do about it? What do you do about it? Justin Trudeau says, I don't wake up thinking about monetary policy. I don't think about monetary policy. I think about families. Okay? That's what he said. Immigration. By next year, Canada's immigration target close to 400,000. What do you think of that number? Okay. And number 3, do you support or oppose more private delivery of health care? Those are today's 3 election questions. Now, he has called unsolicited. We didn't call him, he called me, okay? He's in Manotick. He's running for the Conservatives in Carleton. He's won 6 times there. Pierre Poilievre, good morning.
Good morning to you, Rob. I'm sorry to kind of call you unannounced, but
that's okay.
I got so excited about your top subject on inflation.
I bet you did. But if you're going to answer question number 1, you also have to answer questions 2 and 3. Okay, you can't just run off.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So look, you're an inflation hawk. Okay, you've been on this issue. What do you do about it? And we got to be quick here. What do you do about it?
Stop printing money.
Stop printing money. Okay.
It's that simple. And you know what's really interesting about Trudeau's gaffe yesterday? He said he doesn't think about monetary policy.
Right.
Well, this year, between now and December 31st, whoever's prime minister has to sign a new inflation control target deal with the Bank of Canada. And so we ought to be thinking about it because whoever we elect will decide whether we cap inflation at 2%, as has been the case since 1991, 30 years, or whether we go back to the raging 12% inflation that Trudeau's father unleashed when he started printing money and running massive deficits. So this is not an apolitical issue for the bank to deal with. There is an actual mandate agreement that has to be signed between the next elected government and the Bank of Canada to target inflation. And the fact that Trudeau won't tell us whether or not he's going to keep inflation capped at 2%, as has been the case for 3 decades, suggests that he indeed will allow the cost of living to rage out of control just like his father did. So that's why his comment wasn't as bad as it seemed. It was far worse.
Okay. All right.
So that is why I needed to call in.
Well, I appreciate the call, but you have to ask questions. You have to answer questions 2 and 3. By next year, the government of Canada's immigration target is to be 390,000. I'm rounding it up, calling it 400,000. What do you think of that number? 400,000 immigrants to Canada a year.
Well, inflation number, I'm like you. I I think immigration is great, but immigration numbers should be determined but based on need in a given year. If there's a big need to fill our labor force with new immigrants, then there'll be higher numbers in a given year. If there's for example, a pandemic or a massive recession like the global recession of 2008-9, then numbers go down. So in other words, numbers will fluctuate from year to year.
Right.
And we need our numbers to respond to the demands of the labor market first and foremost. And when it comes to humanitarian immigration, it should respond to the amount of private sponsorship that churches, mosques, synagogues, and other non-for-profits are prepared to...
reading the Conservative platform, there's certainly a lot more emphasis on private sponsorship than there is government sponsorship because under private sponsorship, immigrants and refugees tend to do better. So because they make community connections and the like.
Exactly.
All right.
You have a whole support group that helps them get jobs, housing, language training, and all of that stuff. And it's supported through local fundraising by charitable groups. Big success. It works very well. I've supported it in my own community. Government sponsorship is not as successful because there isn't the human-to-human contact and support to help.
So do you support or oppose more private delivery of health care?
I support our Constitution, which says that healthcare is provincial jurisdiction, and that we obviously need to have public insurance for every single person who needs healthcare and essential treatments should be covered by a public health insurance. That is what is guaranteed by the Canada Health Act. Which I also support, but it's up to the provinces to determine the delivery method. That is how it is done now, and that's how I believe it should be done.
All right. Thank you for calling.
All right.
Okay, bye-bye. Yep, see ya. You never know who's listening, right? Okay. All right, Barry. Hard act to follow there, Barry.
Yeah, that was the worst thing I was going to say, Rob, but you can interrupt me in my call in any time to listen to that man.
All right, okay.
Anytime.
So there you go. You've heard from him. What do you do to fight inflation, Barry? What would you do?
Well, I'd stop trying to charge people for climate change when everybody's been sitting around and huddled in their homes. Nobody's been out driving around a lot, and we've got one of the lowest numbers around the whole world. And I think climate change by people is pretentious anyways.
Okay, so things like carbon tax, for example, driving up the price of fuel and heating fuel. Okay, all right, fine. We got to move along pretty quick here. The immigration target is next year 400,000. What do you think of that number?
Well, if it's easy to manage and we need immigrants that bad, then fine, but slow it down some for a few years until we recover. If we're having a problem with our fiscal policy or whatever we want to call it, like our management of the system, then we shouldn't be spending more money to bring in more people that we can't really take care of that well.
Tie it to the economic needs of the country. Okay, all right. I would remind people, it says even in the NDP campaign platform right now, it says a new Democrat government would make sure that our immigration policies and levels meet Canada's labor force needs. That's the NDP's policy on immigration. Okay, and it seemed, I bet you never thought you'd agree with something you heard in the NDP platform.
No,
but, okay, do you support or oppose more private delivery of health care?
Well, a little bit more private if it takes the weight off of the major systems and what we have going on with our health care. But I'd also tie in the immigration to the health care, that we don't need to be bringing in huge amounts of people, which are really going to probably overburden our health care system to the point where it affects people that are already...
I don't know. If they're here, they're working, they're paying taxes. Maybe a lot of them even end up working in the healthcare system, Barry. Okay, I got to run. Long-term care is staffed a lot by new Canadians, a lot of new Canadian women. You know that. Not making a lot of money either. Last call of the Talkback Hour 3 election questions. We got to be quick, okay? Lanark. Chris. Good morning, Chris.
Yeah, how you doing, Rob?
I'm good. What would you do about inflation? If you're worried about inflation, what do you do about it?
I definitely agree with the last two callers, but what I would mainly focus on is cutting fuel taxes so we can deliver goods and services without increased prices.
Okay, fuel taxes. Gotcha. 400,000 immigrants a year. What do you think about that number?
I think that we all need immigration, but we need to slow it down until we get this economy back in operating condition.
All right. Do you support or oppose more private delivery of health care?
I definitely support more private delivery of health care. It'll take the burden off the system a little bit and open up some more opportunities for possibly even new Canadians.
You should be running this show, Chris. You got us right back on time. Thank you. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye. All right, lots of fun. I loved your opinions this week. Always enjoy the conversation. More on the cost of living and yesterday's big number for the inflation rate, the CPI. Benjamin Tal is the Deputy Chief Economist at the Bank of Commerce. Coming up next on City News.
This is City News.
CIWW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News. Now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, August 19th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now, it's feeling just in the 30s, but 22 degrees in both Ottawa and Smiths Falls. And here's what's making news. Housing, healthcare, abortion, all topics in focus today. Party leaders focusing on the National Capital Region and the West. It is day 5 of the federal election campaign with the latest. Here's City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney.
The first leader out of the gate today is Conservative Aaron O'Toole, who is highlighting his party's housing strategy.
First, we will implement our plan to kickstart the building of 1 million homes in the next 3 years.
He's also vowing to sell off 15% of federal government real estate to turn into housing and to ban foreign investors from buying homes in Canada unless they plan to live here. But another platform promise from the Tories is taking some of the spotlight. In the back of their platform document is a commitment to defend conscience rights for doctors. Liberals say that would effectively cut access to healthcare services like abortion, contraceptives, and medical assistance in dying. Aaron O'Toole says he'll be defending the right of women to choose and access to abortion, but will also stand up for a right of doctors to refuse to perform those medical procedures. Liberal leader Justin Trudeau is making an announcement in Victoria, BC later today. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh will be discussing healthcare in Edmonton. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
City News Time, 11:02. Now, Bloc leader E. Francois Blanchette in Gatineau today. He was asked about the healthcare system in the Outaouais in particular. He says a health transfer should be changed to help the situation not only in that region but the entire province of Quebec. Blanchette says an aging population in Western Quebec deserves more healthcare money because, statistically, older the population, more healthcare is needed. He says it does start, though, with the federal contribution for healthcare. He says that should be 35% instead of the current 22%. Now your forecast with City News weather specialist Denise Andriacci.
We'll keep the umbrella handy this morning and into the afternoon through Smiths Falls as we do have some showers working their way through. It's going to be a warm and muggy day today. Highs for Smiths Falls near 26. For Ottawa, highs near 28, feeling like 37. We're very hot and humid for Friday in the nation's capital. Highs near 32 degrees with a humidex of 40. Your daytime high today, 28.
And right now, feeling just in the 30s, it's 22 degrees in both Ottawa and in Smiths Falls. 531 more cases of COVID-19 in our province today, along with 17 more deaths being reported. However, the province says 15 of the deaths are from a data cleanup. They actually occurred more than 2 months ago. There are 19 more cases in Ottawa, one more in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark. No new cases today in either the Eastern Ontario or Renfrew County health units. The cases count come from just over 26,200 tests. The top doctor in the city of Ottawa says people not vaccinated against COVID-19 are 20 times more likely to catch the virus than people who have both their shots. Dr. Vera Etches laid out the numbers this morning for Ottawa's Board of Health members and reporters.
The rate of people testing positive who've been immunized is 3 per 100,000. The population is smaller and the number of unvaccinated people who tested positive is higher. The rate is much higher, 67 per 100,000.
Dr. Etches says the numbers come from Ottawa COVID-19 cases between July 4th and August 7th. She adds beating the more contagious Delta variant will depend on the number of people vaccinated, the number wearing their masks, and limiting their contacts. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Let's continue our conversation about the inflation rate out yesterday, 3.7%. Benjamin Tal is here, Deputy Chief Economist, CIBC World Markets. Welcome back.
A pleasure. Thank you.
What do you think of the number?
It was high. It was better than expected in terms of inflationary pressures, namely stronger than expected. I don't know how better it is. The question is how sustainable it is. That's the big question. The Bank of Canada is telling you, don't worry, be happy. Inflation is not an issue. It's short-lived. It's a year-over-year story, and therefore we don't see a broadly based increase in prices. From a long-term perspective, that's their narrative. Yeah. And they are maybe right, but you know what? Let me tell you something. Nobody knows where inflation will be 6 months from now. And when I say nobody, I include the Bank of Canada in that nobody.
Does it include you?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. I cannot tell you where it will be 6 months from now. That's the issue. Sometimes we have to admit we cannot predict. You see, there are so many forces of inflationary pressures at this point. One of them is the supply chain issue, and we hope that it will be short-lived. Another is the fact that many consumers are less sensitive to price changes because they are sitting on this mountain of cash. So they will be willing to spend more money on services that they are desperate to receive due to the pent-up demand. And we see a situation in which some people are choosing to sit and stay at home as opposed to go back to work, which means that there is a shortage of labor, therefore wages are rising. So many inflationary forces from different directions. And the question again, with the Canada still printing money, with the Fed still printing money, to what extent these inflationary forces will stay with us beyond the next few months. The Bank of Canada is telling you that it will average way above 2% in 2022, and they are fine with that.
Okay. Transitory is the word economists like to use because they like to use fancy words. They don't say temporary, they say transitory. But the thing is, how transitory is it going to be? Is it a few months or is transitory a few years, right, of stronger inflation?
That's the big question. And at this point, the narrative from the bank, it will be basically 1 year, and then we'll go back to normal, which is about 2%, which is a reasonable narrative. The issue, of course, and that's very important, is that inflation is a lagging indicator. If you wait for it to go down, and it doesn't, it's basically sticky. Then you have a situation in which you're chasing a lagging indicator. The issue, and that's really important to understand, the issue is not inflation. We know how to deal with inflation. The issue is the tools you're using to fight inflation, which is interest rates. If you wait until inflation is way too close, and then you start raising interest rates, you do it in a panic. And when you chase a lagging indicator, you raise too much. The history of every recession in Canada and in the US in the post-war era is the history of monetary policy errors in which central banks raise interest rates very quickly. That's the risk that we are facing. Right. How the Bank of Canada and the Fed will deal with inflation. And therefore, the earlier they start raising interest rates, the better it is. And that's why I'm encouraged by the language from the Bank of Canada telling us that they are going to raise interest rates in late 2022, or even mid-2022, so that they will not be behind the curve. That's what you want to focus on. Not actual inflation, but rather the response to that inflation.
So is your timeline for your team at the Bank of Commerce still that the Bank of Canada won't raise interest rates this year or for much of next year? Is that still your forecast? Yeah.
Yes, I think that what's reasonable to assume at this point is that they will start raising interest rates, let's say by mid-2022, maybe the third quarter. That's much earlier than just a few months ago when people were talking about 2023, 2024. So clearly the Bank of Canada is starting to realize that there is a need to be more aggressive on interest rates when inflation is overshooting and when the economy is improving.
Okay. Say, academically speaking, what impact does stronger inflation have on the consumer, Benny?
Yes, a very important question. First of all, in the short term, that's something that the consumer can live with, because remember, many households were sitting on a mountain of cash given the fact that their income was untouched, but their spending went down. So therefore, they are less price sensitive, and if inflation goes up, they will be willing to swallow it and spend that extra $5-6 on whatever it is in order to get services that they want. From a longer-term perspective, if you see inflation rising without wages rising, then you're really starting to see the impact on your ability to spend and your standard of living. And that's something that you want to avoid. Also, inflation tends to feed on itself because of higher inflation expectations. And remember, the Bank of Canada has a very clear target. It's about 2%. Yeah. So you will not reach a situation in which inflation will be 5, 10, 20%, as it was in many other countries and in the past also in Canada, but rather you will have a situation in which the Bank of Canada will be very aggressive fighting that inflation by raising interest rates very quickly. Therefore, if you start early and you make sure that you're not behind the curve, you don't risk the situation in which interest rates will be rising too rapidly.
It seems to me that not just the Bank of Canada, but also the U.S. Federal Reserve, is the process that they want to go through is, despite these stronger inflationary numbers that even they will admit are stronger right now, it seems that the process is going to be, well, first we're going to pull back our asset purchasing program. That's going to be the first step. Before we even think about raising interest rates, we're going to taper our asset purchases. Would you agree with that? And then we can think about raising rates after.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense to start raising interest rates while you're still purchasing bonds. First of all, you want to reduce quantitative easing, get to zero, and then start raising interest rates. Remember, the goal of quantitative easing is to lower long-term interest rates. So it doesn't make any sense to continue buying bonds while raising short-term interest rates. It's basically going in different directions, doesn't make any sense. So clearly, step one, stop quantitative easing. In fact, you might start reversing it, and then you start raising interest rates. Therefore, we have seen the Bank of Canada already slowing down. The Fed, as you know, is tweeting about it earlier than expected, and the market is reacting to it. And they'll start with raising interest rates.
Yeah, the market's reacting to it as you would expect with lower stock prices. But what's interesting is, despite even the U.S. inflation number that's out, is you wouldn't see the sort of the classic counter trade to inflation, which would be, say, a higher yield on a 10-year bond or a higher gold price. So it's interesting the action that's going on there in the market.
That's a wonderful observation. And why is it happening? For two reasons. One, we have the Delta variant. People are a bit nervous, and the slowdown in China and other places suggesting that maybe the recovery will not be as strong. That's number one. But number two, which I believe is even more important, is really the market is listening to the Fed and the Bank of Canada and realizing that both central banks are willing to start to raise interest rates earlier than before, which means that they will not be behind the curve. You see, the market is terrified of a situation in which the Fed will be late and therefore start raising interest rates too aggressively. If you start early, you will not raise interest rates too aggressively, and I think that's entering the psyche of the market at this point.
Look, I know you're an economist, you're not a political person, but I'm sure you've read the newspapers and you're watching the news. There's a lot of talk about, you have monetary policy, but then you have fiscal policy, and we're in an election campaign right now. Trudeau's accused of making a gaffe on his comments about monetary policy, but let's talk about fiscal policy as well. Is the fiscal policy inflationary? Has the fiscal policy been inflationary?
The fiscal policy hasn't been inflationary so far, but it might be inflationary if we continue aggressively to spend while the economy is recovering.
Okay.
You see, when the economy is in a recession, when you shut down everything, clearly you need fiscal policy, and what we have done made sense. At the same time, we see that we are closing the employment gap. The economy is improving. Yes, we know that the timeline is a bit tricky given Delta, but nevertheless, the direction is very clear. We are recovering. If you spend more and more and more while we are recovering, that can be inflationary in addition to all the other inflationary forces that we are seeing. So the short answer is yes, and therefore any government assistance in the future, in the coming quarters, must be very, very directed and very, very pointed to where it's needed, as opposed to just spending money.
Benjamin Tal, always a pleasure to speak with you, sir. Thank you so much. Yep, from CIBC World Markets, where he is the Deputy Chief Economist, Benjamin Tal. Going to talk light rail. The axles on our light rail trains, the latest problem. 10 LRT cars pulled from service because of that derailment earlier this month. We'll talk about it next, and the need for a meeting sooner than scheduled, earlier than scheduled, with City Councillor Gloucester-South Nepean. Her ward, Meehan, is going to join me next year on City News.
We just took over this business about a few weeks prior to the pandemic, but we've been loving the community, the people, very friendly, but it's been very difficult starting up a new business, just the time that we did, but I'm sure it's the same everywhere. We did take a broken business, which doesn't help us, but we thought we believe in what we do. We're very passionate about food, and we just really wanted to share the Iraqi culture through our food. All our recipes are homemade, so this is very unique. Usually you hear restaurants, shops, it's all frozen food or prepared food. So nothing here is prepared, everything is homemade. We get our meat and produce from a local farm. So supporting local is the way to go. We are supporting all the way. And our meat are actually marinated the day of, so it's as fresh as can be. Quality ingredients, and everything is made from scratch. I get a lot of people when they come in, they say it tastes like Middle Eastern, like back home. So for you to have been to Iraq and have the food there, you can really like compare and see the similarity. We do like to focus on healthy. So our recipes, not only the homemade, again, everything is from scratch, but we have like from combos and to like small sandwiches. Our one of our favorites and very popular is the chicken salad and the beef salad. So now you're getting all the protein and all these amazing ingredients that we all need. During this time, I find a lot of people are sitting at home and not enough movement. So to come here and get something healthy other than go elsewhere and just put, what's not so good for our bodies, makes a huge difference. So we have shawarma sandwiches, combos. I mean, if you're looking for a meal to feed your family, I would highly recommend the family platter. It comes literally with everything, with potatoes, with rice, with chicken, with beef, and we don't charge extra for mix. I know a lot of places do. Here we just add everything to your platter. And lots of healthy choices for sure. We're very passionate about food, and for our small family business, it's been good. Like I said, it's a little struggle, but we are not a chained restaurant.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Okay, let's talk light rail. Caroline Meehan is here. She is the city councillor for Gloucester-South Nepean. Good morning, councillor.
Hi, good morning, Rob.
Yeah, it's nice to hear from you. With this,
Thank you. I've dipped out of a police board meeting to join you.
Oh, my gosh, I really appreciate that then. Thank you.
That's okay.
10 LRT cars pulled from service for inspection after the derailment. What is your reaction to that stunning news?
Well, it is stunning news, but at the same time, we've had nothing but a litany of problems since we launched this train, actually almost 2 years ago. We're going to come up to our 2-year anniversary, remember? I've had no confidence in these trains for a long time. In fact, I don't know if very many people on council or even in the city have confidence. Reliability has been an ongoing issue, and this is just the latest. I'm concerned, as a lot of people in the city are.
Okay. So what should be done then?
Well, I kind of asked this tongue-in-cheek about a week ago, and I said, I threw it out there like, okay, people, throw us your solutions, because obviously we don't have the solution. If we had had a solution, I think we would have found this long ago. I think the biggest problem we've had, number one, was going with a train that had an unproven track record. I don't know what the solution is, because in many respects our hands are tied because of this contract. And, we don't have it, the city don't have the expertise, honestly, to go in and fix these trains. I wish we did. I wish that we could, have a dedicated group of engineers who can tackle these issues. But the way that we've, signed this contract, it's RTG and their maintenance team that are responsible. But I think one of the big questions I had when I heard about this latest incident, when the axle fell off the train, and I know this is the axle bearing mechanism, I guess, is the actual problem, is if RTG is doing regular maintenance, why did this happen? They say they're doing regular maintenance and inspections all the time. Well, obviously not.
Well, if that's the case, you have 39 cars. Let's round it up to 40. 10 of them are out of commission. Is 25% of your rail cars are out of commission?
Yeah, and so how did this happen?
So how does something like that happen?
Well, that's my question. And these are the people that we've signed this 30-year contract for maintenance. So I'm worried. Something has to be done. But what can be done? And where, how honest is everybody being with us? If we can't have a basic city council meeting, an emergency meeting of transit to get to the bottom of this, what do? We just sit and wait? I'm not sure what we're able to do at this point until we get some answers, and they're not forthcoming right now.
Okay. When you say answers are not forthcoming, who should be more forthcoming with answers, do you think?
Well, I would, this is 2 years of problems, Rob. I'm a fairly patient person. When we've asked the people, the transit ridership in the city, to be patient, but quite frankly, we're on the hook for all these millions and millions. This system, $2 billion. Why can't we? We should be able to call in the people at RTG and sit them down in front of transit and say, how long is this going to happen? Have these trains should be going through a rigorous inspection. Yes. We've got the Transportation Safety Board coming in now to do their inspections. That says something. Well, when you have axles falling off trains, that should say something. We have a problem that's bigger than catenary, doors, switches, blah blah blah.
Yeah,
we should be told that these trains are going through rigorous inspections on all the parts of these trains, because quite frankly, we're lucky there was nobody on these trains. Yeah. What if we have a car full of people, in the fall, and this had happened? Yeah. This is getting serious.
Absolutely. I said this morning, last year it snowed October 26th last year.
Yep.
Okay, so it's about 2 months from now. It could snow in 2 months. I know it doesn't feel like it could snow today, but winter is coming, right?
Winter's coming, and we have a system that's totally unreliable. Yeah. And not only that, we have our double-decker buses off as well. So I don't sit on the transit committee. I fully supported Councillor Dean's and Councillor McKenney's call last week for an emergency meeting. And again, though, I was not surprised to have that totally rebuffed, because the manager and the mayor they don't want this to be top of mind for everybody. They're saying, we heard the mayor say when he rejected it that, he's proud of the remediation that was being done and the crew had, done their due diligence and everything was done. Well, that doesn't answer the underlying problem. We have trains that are unreliable. They are not proven. We are a failed experiment in Ottawa with these Alstom trains, and we should never have accepted a product that was not reliable. And I, for one, am really sorry that this contract was signed in the first place.
Okay.
I don't know what the solution is.
Yeah, it's supposed to be another month. Today's the 19th. The next Transit Commission meeting is not till September 20th. So
that's unreasonable, and I think the taxpayers in the city deserve a lot better. There's no reason that we can't get together for an emergency meeting. We can do this virtually. If someone's at the cottage or whatever, they can still join.
Sure. Yeah, it's all virtual.
I would like a better explanation as to why we can't have an emergency meeting.
Okay. You mentioned that you've just ducked out of a meeting of the Police Services Board to join us. What's the big issue at the Police Services Board this time around? What are you talking about there?
We're in an in-camera session right now.
Oh, you're in camera. Okay. You can't tell me. It's top secret.
I can't tell you. Nothing earth-shattering at this point. Nothing that would affect life on the street. Yeah. Although I know that we do have.
Well, let me ask you a more general question then, because the hot issue has been the budget, and you have people who have come before the Police Services Board who say you should freeze the budget. You've had others who say you should cut the budget. You have people who say keep the budget right where it is, keep increasing it. What way do you lean on this right now?
Well, we certainly have listened, and we understand the concerns of everybody who are calling for defunding, and they come from a certain perspective, and we respect that. At the same time, this city is growing. And when it comes to
especially in your area, it's growing.
Yes, absolutely. And everybody in the suburban area is crying for more police. We have, when it comes to police per population, we are very far down on the list. We actually have fewer police officers than many cities comparable to the size of Ottawa. And I think what some people don't realize is that 81% of our budget, 81% is dedicated to salaries and benefits. So we have so little wiggle room. We're dealing with three scenarios right now, whether we freeze the budget, whether we go for a 1% increase, a 2%, or a 3%. And right now, we probably need about 3.4% increase to cover the salaries and benefits, and we're not going to get that. We know that for a fact. But we are scouring the budget for savings. We have a dedicated committee that's doing that right now, and we are committed to trying to bring this budget in with a 0% increase. But to do that, we're going to have to cut police officers, and that's not going to go over well with anybody. Maybe the people who are asking for us to defund or to freeze. It's just not as simple as people are led to believe.
Okay.
There's a lot of things that we don't fund right now because our budget is structured the way it is, and because so much of it is dedicated to salaries and benefits. We don't have a white collar crime tech unit. Which is, one of the areas where crime is growing exponentially.
Like bank fraud and identity theft.
Absolutely, and we should have one of those, but we just don't have the funds.
Look, we're running tight on time here. I really appreciate you ducking out of that meeting and giving us some time. Thank you, Councillor.
Well, I hope I answered some of your questions,
Yes, you did.
Rob.
Yes, you did. Thank you. Very well. Yeah.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Carol and Meehan, City Councillor. We'll talk about the situation in Afghanistan. The World with Professor Elliot Tepper is after the news on City News.
#1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, the 19th of August. Good morning. I'm Chris Curries. Right now in Ottawa, 24 degrees, mostly cloudy. Feels like 33 in Smiths Falls. Feels like 32. Here's what's making news this hour. Conservative leader Erin O'Toole zeroing in on the housing crisis, pledging to build 1 million homes in 3 years and raise barriers to foreign investors. As part of the Tory plan, O'Toole says some federal buildings will be repurposed for use as homes. If you're not vaccinated against COVID-19 here in the capital, you're 20 times more likely to catch COVID-19 than those with 2 doses of a vaccine. Ottawa's top doctor Vera Etches says beating the Delta variant of COVID-19 depends on people getting fully vaccinated, as well as continuing the measures like mask wearing and limiting your contacts. Ontario reporting 531 new COVID-19 cases today, 17 deaths from the virus, although 15 occurred months ago. 19 more cases in Ottawa, 1 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark. No new cases in either the Eastern Ontario or Renfrew County health units. Case numbers come from just over 26,000 tests. And a section of Highway 43 closed in Perth after a serious collision between a motorcycle and a vehicle overnight between Drummond Concession 1 and Rathwell Road around 12:30 this morning. The driver of the motorcycle suffered serious injuries in the crash and was taken to hospital. City News time is 11:32. I'm Chris Curries. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News 101.1 FM.
and 1310 AM.
Every week on the Rob Snow Show, we have the pleasure of welcoming Professor Elliot Tepper from Carleton University to the program for a segment we call The World with Elliot Tepper. He is a longtime professor of international affairs at Carleton University, and our conversation will be dominated this morning by the ongoing situation in Afghanistan. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning, Rob.
Afghanistan fell quickly to the Taliban following the U.S. withdrawal. What did you think about the events as they have unfolded over the last week or so?
Oh, so many things to think about. I thought we should perhaps take a look at what it means in terms of Afghanistan and the things unfolding before us.
Yes.
And then later we can maybe talk about what it means for the world.
Okay.
As we talk about.
Yeah.
In terms of what I think about going on in front of us, first of all, like everybody else, I would put it this way. I was really shocked by the speed of it, but I was not surprised at the outcome. The fact that the Taliban had been regrouping and that the Afghan government's efforts had been faltering was clear pretty well for a long time. It was by no means certain that this was going to be the outcome. There could have been alternative outcomes, but the collapse of the government was very carefully planned by the Taliban. They executed their game plan very, very well indeed.
What does it mean in the Canadian context? A lot of, here we are, we're in the middle of a federal election campaign. The Prime Minister triggered the election on the day of the fall of Kabul. So it's certainly been a very prominent discussion point on the hustings. So what does it mean in the Canadian context?
Of course, there may be some wash over into the election itself. I'm sure you're talking to many specialists on the Canadian election. The possibility that he hadn't planned on this. He had a whole different tack in mind, but now he's got to focus on this, and how he executes our role in all this probably will have domestic impact. After all, we were there, as you know, from the very beginning, and had a combat role till 2014. We had a training role for that Afghan army, and a heavy investment in particularly the future of women and children. Essentially, Canada has been involved, like the rest of the NATO allies, into a democracy construction project, which has now been brought under a great question mark. In terms of immediate situation for Canada and the rest of the world, we now have a humanitarian issue to deal with. We have our own people to get out, and also those who have been helping us. Are we going to be able to get out the people that worked with us, translators and so forth? There's a great emergency in terms of what we do for our own people and people who helped us, but also beyond that, like the rest of the world, we have a humanitarian question to deal with. Lots of refugee issues, lots of immigration issues, lots of where do we go from here?
We do, though, as a country, have a pretty good history on these files, don't we? Accommodating, resettling refugees, fleeing war-torn countries, fleeing disaster zones. We do have a robust system for that, don't we, Professor?
We do, and a lot of it goes back to the boat people. I suspect we will be hearing the word Vietnam before this conversation is over. The Canadian capacity to respond on an urgent basis has been well demonstrated. We've taken in people in conflict from conflict zones in the past. We have been taking in people, in fact, from Afghanistan, and now we have a special 20,000 person emergency quota. We've hired planes, so we have our own planes flying in to fly people out. So Canada is fairly well situated, but whether it suits the nature of the demand at the minute remains to be seen.
Okay. You use this term democracy building project. And I think back to the earliest days of this, and there were people warning not just the United States, but all of its allies as it moved into Afghanistan, that trying to bring democracy or Western-style democracy to a country with any country with no history of it is inevitably going to fail.
Yes.
Well, have those people been proven right, Professor? A lot of people are wondering now.
Yes, I labeled it the way we are now discussing it. That was not the actual formal framing of this. There was provincial reconstruction teams. There were lots of efforts to at least create a space for democracy to flourish through the Bonn Conference and so forth. I think there was always, if I could back up a little bit, how did we get into this situation in the first place? And that's because not 20 years ago, but close to 50 years ago, the Afghan governance structure, so to speak, what they had constructed for themselves, which was a monarchy centered in Kabul, presiding over a highly decentralized, multi-ethnic, bizarre, almost incomprehensibly complex local networks of tribal loyalties and ethnic loyalties. All of that collapsed in 1973 when the king was overthrown. So that system was gone, and after that came the Russians coming in for a decade. And remember, they really bombed the place. They really used all of their power. So we're talking about a 20-year war, but for the Afghans, it's far more than that. The Taliban came in '96. Then we know about that story. Mm-hmm. The Al-Qaeda was sheltered there until 9/11. For the Americans, and this is a point on what is the nature of the project. For the Americans, they've considered this a counterterrorism project. The homeland was attacked from Afghanistan. So for the Americans, really, May 2nd, 2011 was kind of the end of it all when Osama bin Laden was finally killed within a very close range. Yeah, within Pakistan, very close to Pakistan's elite military training academy. So technically, America's role was not to build democracy at all, but nevertheless, the Americans did play a major role, the major role, of course, along with Canada and all the NATO allies, in bringing some peace and stability to the countryside while it worked out in a form of government which allowed some kind of democratic space, if I could put it that way. Okay. And that indeed has been now severely called into question whether it could ever have succeeded. A lot of questions have been raised. Was it worth it, Rob? And I think what we are hearing now from the people who took part in the conflict, our soldiers and others, and civilians and others, is yes, it was worth it. We did the job that we came to do. It was well done. The idea that the Afghan army didn't do its job. 66,000 of the Afghan security forces have been killed. So the Afghans have fought. They have those allies, including us, who tried to create some space for democracy to grow. A whole generation has grown up now that the Taliban now has to deal with, used to the idea of a more or less free press, a robust role for women, and et cetera. So a lot of the questions are, was it worth it? And for the people who have been fighting in there on both sides, the answer has been yes.
Okay. We've heard it from some of the political leaders, Mr. O'Toole, the Conservative leader, later Mr. Trudeau, the Liberal leader running for re-election. We're not going to recognize the Taliban as a legitimate government. We're not going to be diplomatic ties or anything like that. The Americans and the Brits have said the same thing. What do you think about that?
I think that's certainly appropriate for the moment.
Okay.
What's going to happen in a year or so, or in months or so, when it's clear the Taliban do have physical control over the country, and if you want to deal with the country at all, you have to recognize who's in charge. That's assuming that the Taliban do settle in, do create a stable government, are able to put forth what looks like a governing apparatus, but those in control of the levers of the state, if they remain to be the Taliban, we will have to deal with that. But at the moment, they are a terrorist organization who have fought their way to power. Nobody voted for the Taliban to come to power, and I think it's very appropriate to wait and see for sure whether they really can settle in, and are they the type of government that we wish to recognize.
Okay, we see through, whether it's social media channels or whatnot, Taliban leadership trying to send, I don't know what you call assurances. I guess everything's going to be fine. Women are going to be fine. There's nothing to worry about. It's a brand new Taliban, new and improved.
Yes.
What do you think about these overtures?
I had the strange feeling that there was some PR firm working with the Taliban, because I read the complete transcript, including the questions and answers from their first press conference, and it was absolutely nobody has anything to worry about. There's going to be complete amnesty. People who worked with, including people that worked with us, they have nothing to worry about. There's not going to be any door-to-door searches. Women, of course, are going to be included in the government, as will others, all within the framework of our values, Sharia law. Well, one of the women interviewed in Afghanistan said, well, they said that last time when they came to power. There will be a role for women within Sharia law. We've seen what that role was. So there's grave concern there that what we are seeing and hearing is a very improved sophistication on the part of the leadership in presenting themselves to the world. How they actually behave is already becoming clearer. We have reports that there are door-to-door searches going on for people who worked with us, among others, and that the people that have been working with us are not being allowed to leave. So all of the soothing sounds are very welcome. Of course, it's much better than the blood-curdling. If you read the transcript, they say, well, we have learned from our past. Well, this is close to saying we admit our mistakes. Mistakes were made, they said. By the way, the concluding comment in that whole press conference was, have a nice day, which I found very chilling coming from the Taliban.
Okay. So when we come back, there's obviously a lot of moving parts in this, so we'll go and get a more international flavor on this. It is The World with Elliot Tepper, and this is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
My name is Pamela Caillou. I'm a local artist. I'm Métis, and the heritage derives from Algonquin and Huron background. That comes from way, way back from the 1600s. I was trained in school classically, like we studied the masters like Picasso, Michelangelo, Van Gogh, and so you'd have to say it's quite different, my style. What I've done is taken the skills that were taught to me by traditional painting and incorporated that with the Indigenous heritage. My art pieces incorporate the energy and spirit of the Mother Earth in pretty much every single one of them, because I want people to realize, even though we might think we are the masters of the domain here on the planet, that is not the case. It's the Mother Earth that's providing a balance and our causes to live and whatnot. And it's just to always see her and remember her and respect her. Well, I try to keep my style different, because there are like a handful of Canadian artists that are really well known, like Norval Morrisseau and whatnot, but it's been done. So I kind of want to stay away from the pack, and that's what makes my artwork a little more unique. But at the same time, if you're looking at it, you do know it's Indigenous, and you do know it's the woodland style. I usually start by coming up with an idea, which would be, let's say 4 days. Well, it depends what's inspiring me at the time. It could be a lot of trees, it could be water, it could be the medicine wheel. I would choose a subject and try to really incorporate what it is I want people to see from that. So then from there, I would have sketchbooks and I do little sketches of everything because the canvas is expansive. So you don't want to start something and have to throw it away. And then from there, I go on to the bigger piece on the canvas. Once I have on my sketches the direction I want to take my artwork in. I chose a lot of vibrant colors for the pieces because if somebody is willing to make the commitment to have my piece of work in their home, I would actually like them to come home after a long, hard day, and some days aren't so great, to look at something that's very joyful.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Elliot Tepper is with us every week for The World, and we have a single-minded focus on everything that's going on with Afghanistan now. And let's talk about the global view here, Professor. The blame game is on. A lot of people are blaming Donald Trump and the policies that he set in motion with Afghanistan. Joe Biden, if anything, seems to be following through on that. Joe Biden, in his nationally televised address this week to Americans, put a lot of the blame on the Afghan leadership and the Afghan army. He said the politicians fled the country, the army didn't fight. Who's to blame?
When one side makes it very clear we want to get out, and the other side said the Taliban's focus, our entire focus is ridding Afghanistan of foreign forces, you have the beginnings of a deal. February 2020, Donald Trump met with the Taliban without the presence of the Afghan government, our ally, America's ally, and basically signed what the Taliban saw as a surrender document. The document that came out of that said that Taliban agrees not to kill Americans, and it also agreed to open up conversations sometime or another in the great by and by with the Afghan government. But that was clearly a fig leaf. All the Taliban heard from that is America has just surrendered. We are going on the offense. They did. They went on a very broad-based targeted assassinations, lots of violence. They really assaulted Afghanistan's forces, civilian and military forces, and suicide bombings and so forth. So Joe Biden came in and said two things. One is, I am bound by the Trump administration's agreement, which runs out on May 1st, that is that Americans aren't going to be targeted. So if I didn't do something, if I didn't act, then Americans were going to start to be killed again there. And second thing he said is, anyway, this is what I wanted all along. I've never thought we should have stayed there this long. We know now he opposed Obama's surge. He kept it quiet at the time. So Joe Biden is saying, I'm not going to pass on this war to another generation. This is a bipartisan withdrawal from Afghanistan, and there's no question at all that America has been driven out. And it's and this falls on Biden, a very chaotic withdrawal. He's now saying, of course it's chaotic. There's no other way other than a chaotic withdrawal under these circumstances. The Russians, when they were kicked out, when they left, they marched across the Friendship Bridge in formation, flags flying, but really it was the beginning of the end of the Soviet Empire when they lost the war in Afghanistan.
Okay. I think about Obama drawing red lines and then ignoring them. Trump and America first. Now Biden completes the retreat from Afghanistan. 3 presidents now. So are we in an era of American isolationism? The age of America as the world's policeman, is that over?
Well, we had an abnormal situation after the fall of the Berlin Wall, after the end of the Soviet Union became Russia, where a bipolar world became a unipolar world under America since 1989. That was bound to end, Rob. This was kind of not natural circumstance. The name of the geopolitical game was going to be the emergence of a multipolar world, and we now know that it's China in particular. The transition to that multipolar world depends on how America and China manage that transition. And that's a separate topic we could talk about sometime. We could talk about China a bit right now. What we have now is a situation where America, under Donald Trump, said, we don't want to be the world leader. And under Joe Biden saying, we want to be the world leader. We want to reassert the leadership of the democracies against autocracies. And what we've seen in Afghanistan is the autocracy just won against the democracies. Remember, this was a NATO mission. It wasn't simply an American or Canadian mission. It's NATO's largest mission. So the fact that America has been now driven out of Vietnam, basically driven out of Iraq, driven out of, and that's something we should talk about in this context as well, have we thrown our allies under the bus? Just meaning the U.S., but also we're there as well. Yes, we are, I think, into a situation where there's a real question being raised, and we can talk now about Afghanistan and the world and what it means. There's a real question whether America has the constancy, the capacity to maintain the balancing role of being the leader of democracies in a world challenged by autocracies.
For example, there have been reports that China is very interested in cooperating with the Taliban in Afghanistan. What would it want there?
China, well, what it means for the Taliban is that the effort by America to say, you'd better not behave the way you were showing signs of behaving because you will be a pariah in the world. You will have no recognition, starting with Canada, as you had mentioned. And the reality in front of us is that the Taliban will have recognition. The last time they came to power, only Pakistan, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia recognized them. But right now, both Russia and China, their embassies are being protected by and remain open by the Taliban, remaining open in the Taliban era. China has made it pretty clear that they will recognize in due course, but very soon, they will recognize the government once the government's established. What do they want there? This works for China in so many ways. It moves into the American vacuum. As America pulls out, China moves in. China has, and this goes back to the sophistication of the Taliban. Before they came to power, but only shortly before they came to power, they sent delegations to Russia saying, don't worry, your interests are okay. We are not going to allow ISIS to come into you won't have Islamic fundamentalism coming into your country. They went to Iran and talked about we don't know what, but to reassure them. And they went to China and said, you do not have to worry about your Uyghur population. This is an adjacent country.
Sure.
This is a Muslim fundamentalist government in the Taliban. Yeah. They are not going to come to the rescue of their Muslim brothers and stir up problems for the Chinese central government, which, as we know, have been charged with genocide in regard to the Uyghurs by us and many others. So what the Chinese now want is, okay, we now have access in a way that nobody else will have access to the first of all, our domestic interest will be looked after, and that's important to them. But now what about all those minerals? What about the pipelines? Lithium, one of the largest deposits of lithium in the world apparently is in Afghanistan. China will be in position to take advantage of or exploit the opportunities opened up by a Taliban victory by being there for the Taliban at the start.
Okay, we have about 90 seconds left. The images of people trying to get onto helicopters, people trying to board military aircraft, falling to their deaths. I mean, it's gruesome stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But for many, I guess, of a certain vintage, going back to the mid-'70s, it's reminiscent of the fall of Saigon.
Right.
Which I'm sure you would remember, Professor.
Being of that vintage.
I'm wondering, did it stir up those kinds of memories for you?
Yes. A final quick thought on China. They immediately said, if Taiwan thinks that America is going to come and protect you, take a look at Afghanistan. And they said that right away. That's the most poignant comment that China can make right now about the changing geopolitics of the world. Yes, in terms of Saigon, I do remember those. I also remember back in that era when everybody was talking about, China and Vietnam are going to get together and they're going to, communism is going to roll through Asia. You didn't have to be, as I was a student at that time of Asian politics. Vietnam was never going to be a long-term ally of China. They have historic animosities. So the point is, if you know nothing about how the world works, and we know far too little how Afghanistan worked, you will pay a cost. And in terms of Saigon and what we're witnessing now in Kabul, of course these are reminiscent scenes. This is America being driven out.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV.